Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would everyone please stand and join us for the flag salute? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to turn this over to you, Maureen.
Okay. So we have really big binders and a lot of stuff. I do want to point out before we get started, there is a packet that everyone's got in a rubber band. I'm going to go through this as we go through the binder and we go through our materials. I'm just going to note that the top is the enrollment projections updated. There was a transposition and some K numbers. And then the other thing that I'll have you kind of pull out of this packet is the chart of accounts. This is the 17-18 chart of accounts. And I'll refer to this to help you know kind of what things mean. So that's kind of to be pulled on the side. And the rest we'll do later as we get through the binder. There was some corrections that I had to make. And, of course, you can look at it for 3 days and have someone else look at it, and you will always find something. So we found that something and fixed it. So to dig right in, we have a really big binder of stuff. The most important thing that we're going to cover, and we're not going to go through every page of this binder. Breathe a sigh of relief. But I am going to talk a little bit about where we are this year and what it's looking like to end this year. And then we're going to look at assumptions as we built into next year and some of the fundamental changes we made in structuring our budget document, our codes, and how we organize it so that moving forward it's very logical, understandable, and moving forward it's very reportable so that it's going to be very consistent moving forward. In the front binder, you have a budget report guide that kind of goes through the tabs of the binder. We're just going to dig right into the first tab. That's the 16-17 update. And the first section is the property tax update. And I will tell you that I did not do overheads because none of this you can't see anything in an overhead. And then you get distracted from looking up there or down here. So I did not do overheads. But the property tax document is something that I created that shows back to 13-14 the history of our property taxes, comparing what we budgeted at adopted, where we got our incremental changes from the county, and they call those at period 1 and period 2, P1 and P2, kind of like our attendance periods. And then what we got at year end for actuals. And the most important bar on this spreadsheet is the bottom, kind of a rosy colored bar. So you can see in that document, the very last line of the box, between each year is a % change of overall taxes year to year. So starting from 13-14 to 14-15, we went up 2.257. 14-15 to 15-16, 5.801. 15-16 to what we're now projecting for 16-17, based on the latest P2 from the county, is 5.4146. We projected it much lower. So the very bottom line is the change from adopted to actual. So it kind of shows you how from adopted to actual, the property tax changes from the original prediction to the actual tax collection. What I've done moving forward, because you can see there's quite big differences, what I've done moving forward is make a more realistic projection on what we actually get. So that it's not this baseline and we build the budget up as we go, because that ends up creating a lot of confusion, I think. And so the projections moving forward, as you can see going out, are more in line with a 5% increase overall taxes. It's still less. It's still a more conservative number, but it's a more realistic number. We also need to understand that we do have a current tentative agreement that does talk about our tax base as it was built and adopted, and any change over certain increments, and how a contingency trigger language can trigger additional salary increases, and we'll talk about that later. So this is just for information, and it will be reflected later when we get into the multi-years. The next section talks about how it looks from the last time you saw a budget, and this is in summary, at second interim, to where we are today in estimated actuals. And the column between second interim and estimated actuals is what we've changed. The way that our account codes have been for years is not in a real methodical, organized fashion, in the sense that we have budget codes and then we spend our money, and they don't always line up. So doing analysis on how much money we may or may not spend at year end is really a laborsome task. And I literally opened requisitions, I looked at vendors, I had to dig deep into weeds to see what balances are real and what balances are monies not yet spent but obligated. So this change column reflects the increased property taxes that we just talked about from the last budget version to P2 that the county's projecting, and then a little bit of adjustment in contributions, and I'll talk about that as we get further down. So this report has 4 pages. We're talking about page 1 of 4, and we're only talking right now about the unrestricted general fund. The restricted general fund has to self-balance. As we get down into the expenses and we start with teachers and certificated salaries, we had anticipated budgets for substitutes, staff development, different pockets of time card money that we're not going to fully spend. So I went and I swept as much as I could to reflect additional ending balance. And that happens when you may have a vacancy and mid-year somebody replaces. There's a lot of reasons for that. But that's what you'll see in that middle column on page 1. And then on page 2, excuse me, you'll see the total savings in certificated salaries of about $100,000. And that's district-wide. And when you look at the amount of salaries in the budget at just under $8.9 million, that's not a lot, but it's enough. It's something to save. I did the same thing down in the classified salary category. It's very small. It's only $8,500, but I'll take it. And then I went through the benefit lines. These are statutory benefits: STRS, PERS, unemployment, Medicare, workers' comp, Social Security. And a lot of the times you'll see savings in here when you may have budgeted STRS for substitute teachers and they don't all have STRS. So you'll have little pockets of unspent dollars because you have to anticipate that you may have people coming in that are fully STRS vested and some that aren't. So I've gone and I've done a sweep of the benefits, including health and welfare, and most of the savings in health and welfare is in unfilled positions, just pockets of unfilled positions, partial. $81,000 in savings and benefits. Books and supplies and services were much harder to anticipate savings. In that our system takes a purchase order and encumbers it before it's paid, showing that we have a purchase order, it's obligated, but I am not always able to tell if something's been purchased on it and we haven't received an invoice. So there could be additional savings here at year end, and that isn't, it's typical that happens as we go through the process of closing purchase orders that have blanket balances. And we're doing that right now, meeting with the sites and going through all their stuff. So if we go to page 4, you'll see the total in services and contracts was a little higher, $72,000. Most of that savings was realized in some utility balances. Again, they're projected at a certain amount. They didn't come in quite as high. And then in the last category, 7,000 are debt and transfers. So there's a little bit of a savings. We have a bus lease. We didn't have a full payment this year, so we were able to save a little from what was budgeted in the full payment. It'll be full next year. And then an increase of $81,000 in transfer to cafeteria fund. And that is in part due to the loss of a month of paid claims, which was about $114,000. But I also was able to kind of go through the budget and find some savings like I did in the other categories to reduce that hit to the general fund down to about $82,000. It could come in a little bit less than that, but probably not significantly less. So the bottom line, if you go down that middle line all the way to the end, with the increase in revenue and the decrease in expense, it's an increase to the fund balance of about $406,000 to the good. Now, I'll talk later when we get into the multi-year how that fund balance is going to be needed in the event the property taxes do come in at the level that they're projected for salary increases. So that'll be reflected in the 17-18 as we get there. So this will probably be a little bit better, but this is what we really feel comfortable with at this point, showing savings. Any questions on 16-17? That's all I'm going to get into on the current year, and we're going to.
This is my, I'm still learning a lot of these things. So basically what I'm hearing you say is that this is a 4-page summary of cost savings that you're trying to estimate for the whole budget in terms of what was actually between the budgeted and the actuals. You're trying to estimate is that correct?
For the unrestricted portion of the budget, this is a summary of the budget and what we may save in balances at year end. So it goes from a budget to more of an estimated actual figure, which is it's a routine practice at this time of the year when you get ready to close your budget.
Okay, and so we're just looking at this as a way of.
This is all one-time savings.
Mm-hmm.
So the difficult part of comparing 16-17 as we get forward to 17-18 is that 17-18 was basically a complete start over. And it reorganized the budget completely based on what we spend, how the money needs to be tracked, how the money is legitimately supposed to be coded per SACs, per function. And you'll see that as we move into some of the documents, how that's organized. 16-17 isn't organized in quite the same fashion, so it's very hard to go line by line other than the summary. So that's why you only see it in this brief 4-page summary.
Maureen,
Yes.
you mentioned a loss of $114,000 on cafeteria funds. So, but that loss was covered, correct?
No.
So that it's not. So it's the deficit then.
That's 114 in revenue we will not get. So the general fund has to cover that for the cafeteria fund. Okay, so the next tab are enrollment projections, and that's where you're going to have the first correction that you will insert into this section with the updated numbers. It was basically kind of a transposition of Family School and Summerlin's K group with a little bit of an update. And I'm not going to go over this. This is just an informational page. So the next tab, the 17-18 budget summaries. Each section is going to have these like summary definitions, kind of like a.
Can I just ask a quick question about I know we're not going to go into the enrollment, but I just had a quick question about
Sure.
it. So just to confirm, so it was Family School that's 12 incoming K and Summerland is 4K incoming?
Yes.
That's correct. And then if you notice, all the Ks are maxed out. All the Ks are at 24, except for Summerland.
And Family School.
Right. But what I'm saying is that would appear to be an increasing enrollment, unless does it always look like that, and then we lose kids at a certain grade?
So those aren't confirmed enrollments. Those are just projected, and we're projecting them up to 24. Right now, our enrollment is down from where it was in the previous year,
Okay.
significantly so.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And the numbers for Summerlin don't reflect the transfers requests that you've received yet.
So
right?
those transfers requests are counted in their homeschool numbers.
Homeschool. So.
Okay, so the next section, the budget summary analysis, we're going to go over the total general fund at a big, 30 mile picture, and then we're going to drill it into the unrestricted and restricted portion. And I'm actually going to be skipping a lot of the sections of these reports. I'll explain them, but I'm not going to go over them. We're going to kind of go through the latter part of the budget, and then if you have questions on some of the other reports, we can go through there. But a lot of these are just informational so that you have different ways of looking at it. The first thing, if you go into the section A,
Which one?
the 17-18 budget summaries, the green tab A. We saw these at the last study session, and they're actually quite useful. And if you go to the second page, it puts the entire general fund budget into chart view. And I think that for me, on a visual, these tell a big story. So this is on page 2 of 4 of the report, and it has total revenue. And you can see that 87% of all of our revenue comes from property taxes. We have about 4% comes from federal sources, and those are all restricted dollars, not unrestricted. We have 6.8 from state dollars, both restricted, almost all restricted, some unrestricted. And then a little bit of local revenue, and those are donations and the local CEF grants and those types of things. So you can really see that the majority of our money is all property taxes. On the next page, it unpacks what we do with our money. So you can see that between the big blue pie chart, it's the certificated non-management salaries. And then you work down into classified non-management, all of management, and employee benefits. And when you look at the total of all of those, it really only leaves about less than 14% of our budget for utilities and the rest of our operating costs. So it shows the commitment that we've made both in our people, but mostly in our employee benefits. That is a really big pie.
And Maureen, what of that 14% leftover, what would you say is actual discretionary?
I have the perfect answer for you once I get through these. So then the next chart shows you how we spend it by function, what goes in the classroom, what's classroom related, instruction related, pupil services. Ancillary services are basically the after school programs and the athletics, things that happen after the school day. Community services are our facility use, general admin, plant services, which is our custodians, and then other outgo are our transfers. But you can see that the majority of our budget is really invested in kids and directly in classroom and classroom-related costs. And I think that's really important. It shows the real investment that we're making and our commitment to kids. So the next section basically is reports to back that data up. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to have you go to the next tab where it says District Cost, 1718 District Cost Summary. And it's a long sheet. You might want to pull it out. And I think, Andy, this was like a 2 a.m. brain thought, so you can give me what your feedback. Sometimes those work and sometimes they need to be revisited. But this shows us by color, and that it's kind of easy to look at. The top bar in the orange are all people. They are all position costs, both by classified and certificated, sectioned out, and the columns going across the page are our functions. So you see in classroom teachers, instruction, instructional supervision, library media, site admin. You can see all of the things we invest our money on as we go to the right. As we go down, we have everything in the top section, and those are all people. People and their benefits, their costs. The yellow section is our site allocations. So this is done by formula. Every school gets so much money per kid, and this is our site. This is all the money the sites have to spend on their operations. This is all discretionary to the school. The purple, lavender, lilac, your flavor of purple, are our program costs. These are all of the things that support the two top bars. It is it is not people. So if you see salaries both in the yellow and the purple, those are all time card salaries. They include, in the instructional, they include substitutes. They include all kinds of other ancillary costs, including coaches, etc., the things that are not FTE based. You're also going to get, by function, the supplies, services, and other types of expenses. And there's a $7,000 in there because we have a bus lease. Now, the bottom box, which is light gray or light lavender or gray, depending on how it copied, shows you all of the committed costs that are reflected in that purple bar. Legal, utility, property liability, copier leases, audit. We have a school bus lease, substitute teachers, different contracts that are obligated for IT, for curriculum, data processing. Those are all fixed. District-wide classroom consumables. Those are the things that have that historically get purchased for classroom materials. Transportation, operations and grounds. That is committed because we are required by law to obligate so much of our budget in maintaining our facilities. Athletics, which is committed, and our OPEB retiree benefits are committed. When I take all of that committed money out of the purple, which is our program budgets, it leaves us district-wide with $118,370. It's 0.5% with discretionary spending. Now, that's not very much. And that has to cover copier paper, toner, mailing, a lot of things. So it's tight, and it's shrinking as the employee and benefit costs as that pie part keeps growing. This keeps shrinking. And I've included in this chart all the percentages that each box takes out of the full general fund pie. These are all unrestricted dollars. So I thought this was a really good overview of our entire budget, unrestricted.
It is. This is the best I've seen it presented.
Yeah. Like I said, sometimes middle of the night when good things come.
Very good.
So, go ahead.
Just for legal costs, is this then recording that there's only $155,000 worth of legal fees paid for the whole district for everything that is involved?
This is what's budgeted for legal fees. These haven't been paid yet. This is for next year's budget. All of this is next year's budget. Now, this budget was built on using 16-17 as our spending look in detail. I mean, I pulled contracts, and I may have rounded to the nearest dollar, but I did not round to the nearest tenth. I have a detailed budget document that now chronologizes and memorializes like all of the IT contracts, who they are, what they're for, all of the consumables that we've spent, what they are and who we pay. With the exception of our discretionary money where we have to buy binders and paper and stuff, that's pretty much the 118,000. Everything in this light purple has been memorialized by contract or by obligation. So there may be, for instance, in legal, There may be some year-end savings there. Our 3-year pattern does not reflect that. This is probably low. Utilities could come higher or lower. I mean, things will change. I did project in here an increase for our utilities by whether it's water, gas, electricity. So these are all, there are a lot of assumptions in here, and I'll go through the assumptions in a little bit. But this is probably the most explained budget on the back end that I could probably prepare, having gone through this past year. Any questions on this one? Okay. So the next, the reports behind it are nothing more than the reports from the system that back up this spreadsheet. Go ahead.
I did have some questions that I think I
Okay.
tried to get answered ahead of the meeting, and I'm not sure if, anyways, it doesn't matter. But just under the superintendent category, we have in the very top section under the people staff section, can you, maybe it would be helpful if you could just quickly break down what the 1,000, for all of them, and I'll just make a note, and then that will answer my question, I think.
They're in
Oh,
our
it's
chart of
in the
accounts.
chart. Okay.
And did you not get the email, Mo?
I haven't had a chance to process it.
Okay.
So if I got it, I'll process it and answer
Okay.
ask more questions. I didn't see that you had gotten, so you did get back to all
This
those
morning,
questions. Okay, I'll take a look at those now then.
I got them.
Oh, okay.
Bueno.
So the 1,000s are certificated salaries. The 2,000s are non-certificated or non-credentialed salaries. 3,000s are benefits. And like I said, everything in the top, Maureen, are all obligated staffing FTE.
Okay.
They're people.
Right, I got that, but I'm just, yeah, it's okay. It's just there's a lot for us to absorb,
Yeah. It's a lot.
and this is our chance to get to ask questions, and ask questions not just of you, but of each other, and to understand this so that we can make good decisions moving forward.
Absolutely.
Right.
So on that note, I'm going to skip back to the section that says multi-year projections. So I told you you have a lot of information here. The reports are run different ways for you to look at. But I want to talk about now the multi-year projections, because there's a worksheet that I have used historically that helps follow a budget from the estimated actuals phase, second interim estimate, all the way through the next year to estimated actuals. So you can see as we grow in one document where it's changed and how we've adjusted budgets. I have, in this packet, I have actually, there's 5 in this index here, A through E. I've added an F, so you have an A through F, and this is where I'm going to refer you to the rubber band packet and use those instead of these. So there was a little bit of an error, and in this you'll see on the front page, you'll see revised in blue. And on each page of the revised packet, you'll have a page number with an REV at the bottom right. So you kind of know you're looking at the right one. And if you want to just use the rubber band packet, I'll kind of walk you through the different options. They're on the titles. They're in different stapled packets. So as you change, I'll do a little bit of talking until I don't hear clicking. What you have in front of you is not only different scenarios, but I'm going to walk through the assumptions that built the 17-18 budget. And then I'm going to show you what happens in the 17-18 budget untouched, without any reductions at all. And then I'll present you with 5 options with various cut patterns that we can kind of unpack. And we're kind of going to go back and forth because I have staffing sheets and stuff that we can look at. So what I want to do now is go to the multi-year projection, no reductions.
That's the only one that doesn't change, right? I mean, that's the only one that stays in the packet.
They all get changed
They do, okay.
because it's in the multi-year that I had an error.
All right.
I had something that didn't go and flow into the 2 subsequent years. So So this worksheet is kind of a living document in that it's a multi-tab worksheet that feeds into the summary general fund page. So this is a document that we could play with scenarios. I could give you answers, but it also helps like double check, at least in the budget year, numbers to be accurate. The multi-year is where I had a number that wasn't carrying out the 2 and the 3 year. So the first page is a total general fund summary. You can see in the left the second interim budget in white, the changes I explained earlier in orange, and the estimated actuals in the next white column in column C. The green shaded column, the light green, is the change from estimated actuals to the adopted budget. And the green is the actual 17-18 preliminary budget. So,
Which is what we just talked about, that fold-out sheet?
Yes.
Is what we talked about without...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is the total general fund, so that this includes the restricted money in here. But the restricted dollars, remember, when you project out revenue equal expense, and if there is any deficit there, it's because there's fund balance that carries those grants year to year. So this is the total general fund. And you can see at the very bottom of the page where it has total reserve, including the required 3%, it doesn't look very good. It looks actually quite bad.
So if we don't make any cuts, we basically can't submit our budget to county for
That's
approval.
correct. So what this says is that because it's not visual, I will say in the 17-18 year, our estimated reserve, including the 3%, is 7.28. In year 1, it goes to 3.37. In year 2, it goes to 0. And in year 3, it's a negative 2.32. That's untouched. If you turn the page, you have just the unrestricted general fund. You don't see reserves down here because reserves are a component of the full general fund. But what I want to go through on this is the summary page, which shows you by major category. These are the same thing we saw in that spreadsheet with the exception of revenues. It shows the projected revenues. It shows the increase of $1,016,982. That's property taxes, all of property taxes, based on what I showed in the worksheet earlier with the higher projected at about 5% total taxes. It shows some minor changes in federal sources, which is some AP money that comes in from the federal government that's never really been budgeted, but I included it. And then other state revenues declined $345,000, and this is the loss in the governor's budget of one-time dollars. Now, the May Revise, I go to the workshop Friday, and there's a lot out on the May Revise talking about more money for one-time discretionary spending. However, the governor is not committing to pay that money until May of 2019. And it is not recommended by the governor nor by school services or FCMAT to incorporate any of that into your budget.
So I read an article today that said that even with the increases in contributions to CalPERS in particular, that they are running a 20% deficit over last year, even with the increase in the contributions that we've made.
Yeah, and they are talking, the governor is talking about suspending Prop 98. That has not happened in probably 8 or 9 years.
Until 2020 or 2019, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's just a way of saying you don't get any new money. So as a basic aid district where our money is tied up in property taxes, we should start to feel blessed because LCFF districts right now are really struggling to certify 3-year even with cuts. It's becoming really challenging again. So this budget, basically in the expense side, it's exactly as I explained in that long worksheet by program, and these are the changes by major category. What I want you to do is turn the page. And here's your assumptions. These are all of the assumptions that went into building the 17-18 budget and into the 3 future year budgets. And I went beyond just the 2 required years and did 1 more year. And they're color-coded so that you can follow them for what year you've changed. And the green shows you all of the changes that have been made in the to build the 17-18 budget. And it shows you up in the top portion of the LCFF property taxes, the percent that we anticipated changing the taxes, the amount that turned out to be, where we changed federal money, state money, and you see the description on the left of what that is. So the assumptions are really detailed. When you get down into the expenditures, I did the same thing. You see what changed for step increases by bargaining unit and management for certificated salaries. You'll see in here too, this line that says cost of TA trigger. That's the cost of the anticipated 16-17 and 17-18 contingency language in our current tentative agreement. So that is an estimate of what that will look like based on the property tax projections. You can see that we have built-in retirement savings of $120,000, estimated for teachers at $30,000 each. We have increased 1.2 teachers. There was an FTE that a section that we just could not cut in the original reductions, so we had to add that back in. And then we have another FTE that we've added in on a specialized contract. And then you can see where it says adjust stipends, sick and extra pay. That is not full savings in the 1,000s. That's redirecting the money where it needs to go. So some of this budget was in the 1,000s. It should be in the 2,000s. So this is where you see some of those alignment issues. Down in the classified salaries, you see again bargaining unit step increases, management step increases, cost of trigger for classified, retirement savings. This was at what we knew at the time. We had to add a PE aide at the middle school because we are hiring a male teacher for the girls' PE, and we need a female in the locker room. And then you see where adjust stipend, sick extra pay, that's an increase of 35. So there's going to be this play between object codes to align things where they actually belong. The employee benefits, again, you can see what's attributed to step increases, the cost of the trigger, retirement savings, positions, and most importantly, the increases in health and welfare, the increases in STRS, and the increases in PERS. So between health and welfare, STRS, and PERS, that's almost $250,000 or $450,000 of increase before we even touched a person.
I'm just doing the quick math on the TA trigger and the step and column increases for classified and certificated. We're looking at almost $800,000.
Right.
In basically salary increases.
Right.
And then you couple that with the PERS increase to essentially
over time
25% of was it through 2 years from now?
So in let's see,
2020?
17, 18, 18, 19, 19 in 2021
is
PERS will be just under 36%. STRS will be just under 27% of salary.
And that's assuming they don't increase it to make up for the
STRS
for the
is
deficit.
talking about increasing.
Well, STRS has to go through.
STRS has to go through
the legislative.
Yes.
PERS can be just a governor's budget office can do that, right?
It can, but they.
Well, they did last time.
They did. So this increase, this did increase based on their investment, their lower investment returns. It did increase that 0.5%. They have adjusted that again, but it's to our better by a fraction.
But see, the problem is they're budgeting 7% return on investment. In the last 2 years,
It's come in lower.
They've seen 1%.
Yeah. So PERS could change. And I know that there's a lot of lobbying by CSBA and school services and even the union groups to have the state mitigate some of that and relieve the school districts, because you can see what it's doing to school districts. And you can see if you go across to the blue, the first, second, and third blue line, that's the multi-year assumptions. And you can see how it impacts going out all those years. The interesting thing about PERS is PERS does not incrementally go up because most of this increase is happening now, and then the out year increments are a little bit smaller. STRS is kind of the opposite. They're like growing their increment higher because we're already in the 20s for PERS at like 24. So it still is growing, but not quite to the same extent as the others. And then the health and welfare is the other piece that's just going to continue to rise. And there's a lot of unknowns right now. Healthcare has got a big unknown. Federal funding has a big unknown. So
I have a question. How come the trigger is not projected out through 18-19?
the full cost is built into 1718 for 1617 and 1718, and then that's the end of the language. So you won't see it added because the 1819 is only the change from the 1718 budget, which already incorporates the higher salary. So you don't have the cost flow through. This is the change to the actual budget, so it's incorporated in the ongoing costs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our current agreement is through 1718, and then we open negotiations back up in 1819. So if you follow on the, and I have the page numbers at the bottom, the NR page 4, it talks about changes to books and supplies. And you can see there's a realigned books and supplies. So this is just moving those expenditure categories. And then in the services and operating expenses, you can see increase in property and liability. That's what P&L is. Utilities, phone, internet, and again, more realignment based on what we actually spend.
The first option? Yes.
So the total change in expenditures is 1.4 million, just under 1.5 million dollars. And that's on page NR4. And then the other financing
Reductions page still.
The other financing sources are different. Like we had some transfers to CCP, that's no longer happening. Adjust the transfers to cafeteria fund, that's a slight increase. We're assuming that all reimbursements are claimed next year. There's a one-time transfer in the current budget from Fund 17, and that comes out of the budget. And then we increase our contribution to special ed. This is both the trigger language and the cost to those staff, step and column increases to those staff, as well as adding the preschool. So the preschool, as I explained, I think at second interim, it was not revenue neutral. So the preschool overall, adding the preschool was about $180,000 cost to us.
How much?
$180,000. So that's also included in that 480 number. So those are all of the assumptions used to build the 17-18 budget. And then you can kind of see how the multi-year played out across the line. And if you go back to page NR2, which is just the unrestricted summary, the thing that is most telling, and if you look at the light blue bars, you see the change in revenue and the change in expense, including transfers. That 63,000 in column F and that 88,000 in column H is all that's left at the end of the day to increase the budget from year to year and cover costs. So that compounding effect of salaries and benefits hits us pretty hard. So when we had the budget study session in January, we talked about the process that we went through to come up with some reductions, and a lot of the process involved kind of the executive management team, which was the three of us up here, Darlene and Jamie and Gerardo and I. And I had basically gone through staffing. We built staffing ratio sheets, and I kind of went through and looked at kind of just very unbiased, generic FTE comparisons by school, and we came up with some reduction estimates and projections that were potential. And we know that some of those were not possible, and that some of those can still be realized. So what you're going to see now are 4 different scenarios with different reduction possibilities that are the options available to us today. Understand that the window for any certificated reductions has closed. So the only opportunity we have to affect reductions on an ongoing cost basis is, and if you're talking about staffing, and we can go back to this long sheet because it's kind of nice to have this out as we go through, the only place that we have to affect ongoing salaries are classified positions, which don't make up the majority of the cost in our salaries. So I had the opportunity on Friday to sit down with Diana Rigby, our incoming superintendent. I had the binder finished, so we had the opportunity to sit down and go through the binder. I went over the options with her. I went through some of our thought process and kind of our discussion on what happens in the event reductions are made and how it works with staffing and administrative staff, et cetera. So that's all been discussed and vetted, and right now I'm just going to talk about more generic FTE savings, and how that plays out in actual implementation is something that we handle on a staff level later. So I've already gone through the...
Maureen, since you mentioned Diana, I would be interested in knowing which of these options is her preferred and which one she says we
I
can't
actually feel
do,
a little bit uncomfortable personally speaking or having someone speak for someone who's not in the room and not officially part of our district yet. So I appreciate that you were able to speak with her and work with her and get the binder together. But I just don't, I wouldn't want someone speaking for me in a professional capacity if I wasn't there too. Do you know what I mean?
I will go through all the scenarios, and at the end of all the scenarios, I will give you staff's recommendation. Does that sound okay?
That sounds good.
All right. So the first option, option 1, includes reductions in retiree savings, 2 FTE administrators, 1 FTE teacher, and 1 FTE clerical. And when you turn to page 1-1 REV on the multi-year, you can see, and I'm just going to go straight to the bottom line so you can see what it does to the reserves. You can see that it creates a reserve in the current year of 8.68, first year out 597, and then 426 and 403. Option 1 is a certifiable budget. So if you look at, I'm going to go straight to page 3.
Maureen, can you remind everyone following along what is a certifiable budget?
So we are required by AB 1200 to certify the current and 2 subsequent years with no less than a 3% reserve. So that line at the bottom has to be at least 3%. I will remind again everyone, including the board, that the board policy does state that the board have a 10% reserve. So we're far from board policy. The goal is to try to somehow work towards that. Right now, I'll take the 3. So if we go to page 3, you can see in the assumptions where those savings happen in the green column for 2 administrators, and this is midway down, 1 teacher, the same assumption of adding a teacher, and the same other assumptions apply, but it does have you see where the reductions get incorporated here. So that's with those cuts. That's option 1. I will tell you that the budget presented is based on option 1. That's just because that's where it ended up. Now, the other scenarios, the budget is not finished. I'm just saying the budget as it's presented in these documents is option 1. I'm not telling you that that's staff recommendation right now. So I'm going to then skip to section C, which is option 2, and we're going to look at the revised option 2. Option 2 includes retiree savings, 1 FTE administrator, the lesser salary. We have 2 positions, one's higher, one's lower. 1 FTE teacher and 1 FTE clerical. And if we turn the page to 2-1, it shows you what happens in the current year. It takes the current year down to 8.1, second year down to 5, and the third year is below 3. 2.3. And if you look at the number above the percentage, that's the magic number that has to be reduced in order to get that to 3. That's what we're short. And you can see in that third year out, it doesn't work at all. So that's option 2. Now we're going to go to option 3, section D. Section D includes retiree savings, 1 FTE at the higher salary, 1 teacher, 1 clerical. So you can see we're just kind of playing with options. And if you go to the second page, it also does not certify a budget by only a little bit, though. So this would only need a little bit of tweaking. It's only short in that third year by under $25,000.
When it says 2 FTE administrators, what does that mean?
That means 2 FTE administrators, and it doesn't necessarily mean where or what they will be doing.
Right, but like principals, support staff,
It's an
librarians.
administrator at this point.
So it could be, do we have any sense of whether that would be like a principal or?
Principals, directors, supervisors, coordinators, it's the administrative team. So what we do when we recommend something as generic as that, we are looking at the entire organization and how we can utilize the administrators left into the positions that we have the best we can have them, serve.
So obviously, like for instance, if a principal were cut, that's going to affect one school a lot more than another. And I feel like
Understood.
As a board member, I need to know, like I might recommend a cut based on the staffing position if I had more information about the position itself. If it says 1 FTE and that's broke, that actually is turning 3 different positions into 0.75 FTEs. That maybe is more palatable than suddenly a school has no principal. Do you know?
Well,
do you see
we're
what
not
I'm saying?
right.
So I understand that you're trying to be as generic as possible, but I'm wondering why. Because it's not helping me make a better decision, and it does seem to be making it a more palatable thing to want to just cut for the sake of the budget.
Ultimately, it's not our job to pick and choose who
No,
stays
I understand.
and who doesn't. It's our job to approve a budget
Right.
that the staff then can work within.
But
That's-
Andy, have you seen how in other districts what happens when there's a resolution to reduce staff? Have you seen how other districts work with that? The
No.
following agenda item is in a list of the seniority of the staff, so you don't get a sense of like who's going to get cut.
That's
but you
staff,
have a sense
though.
of
This is administration. So
So you
administration's
wouldn't-
not based on seniority.
right. But what I'm saying is we're not making these decisions within a vacuum, and I know that you as a team have made choices in order to come up with these solutions.
That's our
For
job.
some reason, the only logic that you're giving us is based on pure numbers. And I can't make a decision based on pure numbers because these are people and students, and I need to do what's best for the students.
Yeah, but what we have
And so just telling me that what's going to be best for students is having a budget that can be certified for 3 years doesn't necessarily hold water for me.
Well, I am in a position that have to care about the numbers. I have to certify a budget. We don't want to have a budget that's not certified. I've been in those situations, and it is not something we want to go through. And this is not a numbers game. This is a game of making sure that we are serving our kids the best we can with the resources that we can afford.
So how can I do that without understanding how these cuts are going to actually affect the students who are impacted and the schools and the families that are going to be impacted?
So
How can I make that decision?
I'd like to bring us back to our workshop on Friday, and what our role is as board members versus what staff roles are. And our job is to give budget parameters and make sure that we're certifiable. It is our job to do that. And I know it feels not personal because it's just numbers, but it's their role to make those personnel decisions and our role to stay up here at the budget level.
Right, but there's this thing called, which we've heard so far, which is the assumptions. The word assumption is not just a term used for budgets, although it is used in budgets. In the larger world, it's used to understand the logic and ideas that we're all taking into consideration in order to make a choice. So,
But it seems like we're convoluting. You're convoluting logic and emotion, and so we're supposed. We need to
I'm
take
not
the
being
emotion
emotional.
out of it.
What I'm saying is, I don't hear anything about the assumptions, and that's what I was trying to get at when I said, hey, this document doesn't have any process-oriented thinking, meaning the people out there, these cuts get made and we're held to account for it because we're the board and that's our responsibility.
I disagree.
But hold on. If somebody stops me and say, hey, why did you cut, the person over there? And I just say, well, I don't know. My CBO just told me that I had to make a cut of an FTE and otherwise my budget couldn't get certified. Is that going to get me any sort of... Is that going to get me anywhere in the community?
Well,
No.
Let's talk. So if our budget, just so you understand what we're talking about, if our budget isn't certified, and we aren't able to maintain our reserve, then it really doesn't matter what we all think because we get taken out of the equation completely, and somebody from the state comes in, and they say, okay, board, you're no longer. An active board, you're an advisory committee maybe, and administration, you're going to take, we're going to cut this administrator, the bargaining unit, you're going to take this cut. Look at what happened to Hope. That we just right in our very backyard with a district that was, for all intents and purposes, was a very healthy district. All of a sudden, they're being taken over by the state.
Yeah, Andy, but there were accounting mistakes that contributed to that. Huge accounting mistakes.
Okay, do you see that that if we don't make any cuts this year, we are $1 million. We're spending $1 million more than we have coming in, and that the next year we have a 5% budget or reserve, and the year after that we're down to less than 1.
Well, the way I see it is, yes, reserves are going down from, let's say, what's it right now, 10.2, and then 8,
No.
7.
No, we're not 10.2.
We're at 8.7
Okay,
right now.
okay, and then it goes down. But this is what I've been saying, that let's look for other ways to increase the reserves.
I think Maureen has done a great job of already finding $400,000 in savings. She did what a couple board members directed her to do and went line by line, contract by contract, correct?
Absolutely.
You have
See my
squeezed
office.
every penny out of what you could.
Yep.
And I think you've done an excellent job also of showing the logic of the assumptions and how the budget was built based on those assumptions. I don't see any flaw in that. If you see one, though, let's talk about it.
I'm just wondering, it seems very, very dramatic to me, the change from the multi-year projection that you gave us in January. I have it right here, January 24th, 2017. The first interim with the projected budgets for 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. At that point, it's a 10% reserve, 8% reserve, 5% reserve, 3% reserve, 2% reserve, and that was with the staffing cuts that were being recommended at that point. So can you just, maybe you've already said this, and I'm sorry if I'm dense and you're having to re-explain this, but Could you break it down for me a little bit? Like, and I'm happy to pass this down, but these
So
are
you
the-
need to go back to the first section where I explained the current 16-17 second interim budget and where we're estimating our actuals.
So there's a $400,000 change in salaries. I got that,
Not
right?
salaries, no, not just salaries.
But $400,000 change in staffing costs. Is that
No,
correct?
No.
No.
Okay,
There's no-
$800,000. What was just what?
Okay.
What's the big change here? And how?
So you
why
can't-
does the year-on-year projection change so much? Because to go from a 10% reserve, 8% reserve, 5%, 3%.
She just got the.
So I just
tax
went over that.
receipts.
If you go back to the very
But
first
the
section.
tax receipts are much greater, and I understand that there's
If you go back to the first section that talks about the 16-17 budget, and this is the very first section, and it's under section B in the first tab. This actually has the 16-17 second interim budget that was presented to you as the board, and it has the property tax increase based on the P2 that we received, which is the $20,265,000 number. And then it shows what we're anticipating for estimated actuals. And these are savings throughout the budget, not salaries, throughout the budget.
Yeah, it's.
So Maureen, you saw that we actually spent close to $100,000 more as a result of the cafeteria fund overdrafting. And then we spent, it's all spelled out there. And then you couple that with the increases in salary due to the tentative agreement getting triggered.
But we also,
So so in the budget binder that I handed today, in the
Remind
first,
us
we're not
of the
finding
tab.
this is the very first tab,
Here.
the
It's
very
this very
first
first
tab,
No, it's the
16,
very,
can you-
very first one.
16-17
Update.
It's this guy right here.
update. It says 16-17 update. And you have two documents, the tax change, the property taxes, and then you have, it's called a fiscal 06 comparative object summary. And this is what talks about, this is a second interim budget as you've seen it, and the changes that are proposed for estimated year-end close. And this is where you will see the property tax increases as well as some one-time savings that we've tried to comb the budget and find for fund balance savings. I don't know what you're looking at, so I can't respond to that document.
it's the multi-year projection.
So, so that will move. We're only talking, this is the first interim. We've already had another budget since then that you saw at the board.
Right.
Yeah, so this is not,
I'm trying to figure out why these are so dramatically off, and these are based on the changes that you recommended.
Well, they're off. That was our first interim, so we've already had a second
Right,
interim.
right.
And now these are getting closer to actuals because we're essentially
So
at the end of the
are
year.
the expenditures what has changed dramatically? Because what I know is that our property tax monies have increased
well,
quite
that's
dramatically.
what you see on page 104.
Right. But what's the
Well-
in a nutshell, what's the problem? Can you just
That's exactly what we just went over.
discussed it.
That was just the,
well, I must be super dense because I'm not getting it. I want to be able to have a broad view. We keep talking about how as a
That was
board
an
member.
incredible. That's exactly what we just have been discussing for the last hour.
Well,
So the big problem.
I'm just asking-
I think I have it in notes.
Okay.
So the big problems are with our tentative agreement from the past negotiations. We had agreed to this contingency salary increase, which is about to be triggered, and it's going to cost us an additional $800,000. Am I correct in that number?
Well, with step and column,
With step and column.
but step and column was already in there.
Which we did not plan for.
The tentative agreement increase is 457, 131, so about 600,000,
Okay.
and then you got to tack on about 30% to that number that we didn't budget,
For
just for
benefit.
pension, just for pension.
For pension.
Yeah.
okay,
So if you
And-
can,
and
so if you
the
would,
pension is something that all districts have to
right,
contend
I
with,
understand,
so
and the
that's
state's
just not
grappling
us.
with it. I know a lot of districts are grappling with the state revenues. So the $800,000 that was not budgeted for, is now throwing our multi-year projections completely off.
Yes, and that's where the detailed dollars are tied to those in these documents that you have in front of you.
And is the 800,000 as a result of our negotiations, our obligations, our payroll obligations as negotiated in our certificated contract, partially, and by CalPERS, CalSTRS negotiations. And there's no way we could have seen that in January.
No, we did. The numbers have changed.
They've gone up.
The assumptions have changed. The trigger we did not know in January.
Okay. So that number has gone up, and we didn't know that in January.
No, we did not.
Okay.
Is the triggers based on the tax receipts?
But isn't okay? So but
We
the trigger
didn't even know that at second interim.
'Cause
We did not know that until
So-
April.
basically what you're saying is that over a certain point, the increase in tax revenue is almost
a
completely
negative.
canceled.
Completely consumed.
So this is why this is why the board was actually opposed to that language, because if you're giving 80% of the increases in tax revenues away, but your costs are actually 120%, so for every increase in tax dollar, you're losing essentially 20% out of your general fund. That's the problem. And
We are also losing state revenue in one-time dollars. So we're on.
teachers.
We're actually on
years.
option 3, Mo, and if I could have you turn to to the page 3-1, on the revised, it says 3-1 with an REV at the bottom right. It's option 3. It's one of the ones that I handed out.
It's one of these. It's one of these guys, Maureen. It's one of the ones
I
stapled ones.
replaced it into the binder.
So if you look at the green, the green shaded column, those are all of the changes from the estimated actuals current year to next year's budget. And you can see in column D, the revenue is increasing 527,000, and the expenses are increasing almost 1.5 million when you add the expenditures and the other financing sources. So our expenditures are outweighing our revenues by almost $800,000.
So I'm just going to say, because this is how I've processed it, there's going to be an increase in salaries at the expense of some FTEs.
Yes.
Bottom line, right?
And
that's
this
the
is-
only place we have to cut because our discretionary money is so low.
And we also knew going into fact finding and through the impasse process that was going to have to happen.
But you're showing, is this correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. And again, this is all new to me. So you're showing that we're not going to receive any federal revenues for the projected budget 2018. I'm at 3-1, the very top column,
It's showing no change in federal revenues.
Okay, so it's the same thing. But you're also projecting that the property tax is going to be the same as it was.
No.
Oh, the change is going to be virtually the same off $250 as it was last year?
No, if you look at column F, column H, and column J, that's the property tax increase year to year.
Okay, so you're projecting that it's going to increase $1 million.
Yes. And the assumptions are on the following page, the percentage and the detail. All of the detail, that's unrestricted. If you go to page 3,
This is mine, right?
that's where you see all the detail. How much we're projecting it to increase, the amount year to year, step and column year to year, health and welfare year to year, STRS year to year. That's where you see those changes that we're projecting one year to the next in all of our columns. So in option 3, if you look at 3.1, it's still not a certifiable budget, but only a fraction. We already talked about that. So if we go to now option 4, and we go to the first page of 4.1, this option includes 2 retiree savings, 2.0 FTE administrators, 2.0 FTE teachers, and 1.0 clerical. And this is assuming the 1.0 teacher that was already discussed, as well as a 1.0 FTE vacancy that we feel we could not fill.
So just
through retirement.
Yes.
So just on page 3-3
3 dash. We're going back to 3.
in expenditures, sorry. It looks like under certificated, under classified, and under employee benefits, it says reduce 1.0 FTE teacher dash RHS. Rincon High School.
Yeah, that was already, the resolution for that one was already brought to the board.
So the board already approved these reductions.
That one.
And what about under clerical
No.
and the employee benefits as well?
Those just follow the positions.
Okay.
So we're back on 4-1. This again was 2 FTE administrators, 2 FTE teachers, 1 FTE clerical. And on page 4-1, it does show this greatly improves our bottom line with a 9% in 17-18, 6.7 18-19, 5.3, and a 5.4. So you can see how different scenarios move that bar considerably. And then again, you see the restricted and unrestricted effects and the costs. The last option you don't have a tab for. This is F. This is something that we actually did yesterday. So it didn't end up with a full tab in the binder. It's option 5. And this is retiree savings, 1.0 administrator at the lesser salary, 2 teachers, and 1 clerical. And if you go to page 5-1, you see what it does to the bottom line. At 17-18, we have 8.57, 5.77, 346, 215. Now, we only have to certify through column I. So this would be a certifiable option.
So with the lesser salary or greater salary, I think lesser is spelled wrong. That's the English teacher in me. But unless it's like a term I'm not familiar with. But with a lesser salary or greater salary, there's obviously in your mind a position because there's a salary scale.
They're different positions with different duties, yes.
Right. So it would be helpful for me to at least understand the duty and the fact that you're not thinking, oh, a 0.25 here, a 0.25. Clearly, there's a position somewhere in mind that is being discussed, it being eliminated. I would like to know what that job title is at least before I vote on eliminating it or not.
So option 5 is actually
Can we actually go over that without
violating.
Not the job title, but you could at least tell me it's an $89,000 position, or it's a $50,000 position, or it's a $25,000 position.
This is a lesser cost to the general fund because it has multi-funds attached. There are restricted monies attached to this position. So the impact to the general fund is not as great as a full general fund position. But I will tell you that option 5 is the recommendation that staff is putting forward. We do feel that option 5 has the least impact to our schools and our sites.
Why?
Because it has been discussed and analyzed very closely by staff.
Is that enough information for you guys to make a good decision that you feel like supports children? Just being told,
I can give a little
us?
bit more information on process.
I do trust
that's
them.
What we do.
I do trust them.
That's why they work. They have the
It's
job.
just rewards.
When the community comes to you and says, hey, this position was eliminated, and people ask you why, you have to say, oh, well, just trust us. We didn't ask any questions. We didn't try to get
Maureen,
more
we
information.
have 5
We just
options here. We have 5 options here.
but
Those.
Can I speak
But
to
this-
process?
Yes,
is
you may.
this is the
Please speak to the process, Jamie.
Thank you so much. So I'd just like to point out that the administrator positions that are being proposed in every option and the 2.0, the second FTE teacher that we're proposing are vacant positions. So nobody would lose their job. There would be positions we're not filling. So I just want to point that out. And then I also passed out a packet to the board and to the public, and it's available here. Feedback from each site staff. So you have the feedback from each site staff. So we went through the principals, and myself included, as I'm also a principal, discussed with our staff what are the high value items that they would like, to us to work to preserve. And that is provided for you so that you can see what staff really value. In the process, the why, Maureen, the answer to your question why, we do everything we can to keep this as far away from kids as we can, to make sure that kids still have very good services and excellent education in their classrooms. And so that's why these are the proposed cuts.
Can you just restate again for the record that that administrator position is vacant? So no one's losing their job.
Correct.
So if we
Same
know
with
that
the
it's vacant,
second FTE teacher.
what I'm a little confused about is why in the past we've been told we're recommending eliminating this vacant position. Here's what the vacant position is. So I'm having a really hard time with the sort of opacity that's being shown right now, because I don't know why it needs to be a mystery.
I can
think
tell
that
you that
the best
answer as well.
governance and the best. I can't make a decision based on no information.
Okay, so I can talk about the second FTE teacher. We can't make that decision until we get enrollment numbers that are more finalized. We have very, very low kindergarten enrollment right now compared to previous years at this time, but we can't guarantee that because they have until first day of school to enroll. So we have to make those decisions based on enrollment. So it would very likely be in the elementary because we don't have room in the secondary. The secondary where we were low in enrollment was at Rincon School, which is the resolution you already passed. Regarding the administrators, we have a small team as it is. And while we would support you if you would like to go with option E4, to cut 2 administrators, in analyzing that with Mrs. Rigby and ourselves, we feel that we're all working pretty hard right now and stretched across a lot of sites. And we've had feedback from staff that they don't really feel it's best to be, sharing principals amongst sites, and we aren't able to get to issues as quickly as we'd like to get them to. So that's why staff is recommending 5. Does that help you at all? And so then the staff feedback is there for you, and I think you'll see a lot of the same themes over and over again. Staff really value counselors. They value intervention folks. They really value their instructional assistants that provide differentiated instruction in the elementary classrooms. The secondary staff have provided for you the programs that they value. So we worked really hard to make sure that everyone had a voice in this process and coming to you with information from everyone.
So we know that one FTE, we already know where that was because whether we should have or not, we found that out. The second FTE, what you're saying is that it's not how you told us over and over again that we couldn't make certificated staff reductions because that we've already passed that deadline. So explain to me how that would be allowable.
That's not filling a retirement. So we have multiple elementary retirements, so we would not fill a retirement and we would place teachers according to enrollment at each site.
So we do have the option for not filling vacancies at management's discretion. And I can tell you in my years of experience in both negatively certified districts and districts where FCMAT has come in and taken over, that there will be, when you get to the point where you are either qualified or negative certified, meaning you don't have 3%, you can't guarantee that you can meet your obligations for the current and 2 years. They will put a complete moratorium on any unfilled vacancy, and they will load your class sizes till contractual maximums, and we're trying not to have that happen and have the real priority. And you saw that earlier in what happens with direct instruction to kids in the classroom and the support of those kids. Nothing is touching that.
So for this clerical position, tell me about how that's not going to affect, or how that's going to affect the people working with this person, without being specific to sites or whatever.
But did you just hear what Maureen said? If we aren't able to meet
I'm not.
but it's important that you understand that, Maureen.
Well, thank you for nailing that into my head.
No.
Are there other things you'd like me to emphasize to you, Andy?
Well, no, but
Because
it just
I'm
seems
trying
like
to
you're
emphasize-
not hearing what she's saying. That's all.
Well-
That's my only point.
Well,
I can hear a lot of. Andy, I appreciate what you're saying. I hear what everyone's saying. I think a lot of what I'm hearing is a lot of like really bad things are going to happen to us if we don't get our thing certified. What I understand is that this is the third chance that this same board has had a chance to look at these budget numbers, which have changed and gotten, I would say, progressively worse based for whatever reason. A majority of this board has continuously chosen to go with whatever the staff recommends without asking really deep questions, I think, about them. And I myself have had deep concerns about the cuts and decisions being made from the beginning. So you know what they say, that the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a new result. So the one thing I will say, though, is that I do feel like I'm excited that we got options. I'm excited that we have more insight into the process. I'm excited that that the detail and the level of clarity and explanation is the highest that it's been so far in my experience of this process. So from my point of view, I feel like the process is getting better for me to understand, but because of the opacity of these choices, I can't necessarily support what I've seen so far.
And besides, it's the board who's in front of the community, who the community says, well, the board passed this resolution. It's not the district. Just look at the coastal view. Pitchforks, the board. People telling the board.
That's
they're
correct.
blaming
It's the board that makes the decision on the budget.
That's what we get paid the big bucks to do.
Yeah,
I
but
can-
I mean, but
I can speak to.
No, I mean that's really ultimate.
It's out there.
Well, no, but no, but
Yeah.
that's really
But at the same time,
that's
we
90% of what we do.
didn't.
I would say
we
this
didn't
is
write
this
any
is
of
the
these.
most complete budget summary, budget presentation, the clearest, most concise since I've been on the board. And as far as being opaque, I don't know how much less
Okay,
transparent
then
it
you're
could
not
be,
hearing
Maureen.
me. Then you're not hearing me, and I'm sorry, because I'll try and be more clear.
Yeah.
Okay. They know, staff knows why they chose these things. And some of the things it's not appropriate for them to share with us, and we do have to just trust them. But I'm saying I need as much information about whose lives, not who's going to get fired or whatever, but how this is going to affect the
That's not our-
sites
that's
in
not
which
our
this is
job. Why?
affected.
Why?
Why do you have to know that?
Because it goes into my ability to make a decision, and it's information that I've already been given as a board member. So in the past, when we would get a personnel summary, we'd say like, "Oh, there's a retirement, and we're not gonna try and fill this position," or "Here's a retirement, and we are gonna try and fill this position." And so it's very odd to me that now, when there are things that are trying to be open, it's
But do you
strange
wanna-
to me that like things that were being told to us aren't anymore, and that.
But
So can I speak to exactly why you had the last teacher specifically outlined to you and the site? It was because it triggered the March 15th notice, and so because of seniority, we had to let that employee know. The second teacher is only recommended because of a vacancy. So with a retirement, we never say we're filling this retirement with this person, because when you're hired, for example, as an elementary teacher, you're hired as a district elementary teacher, K-6. That's your credential. So you can be going anywhere to any one of our 5 sites, because that includes Carpenter Middle School. So we never replace this person with this person. It's the number of FTEs that we have that we can fill, not the specific FTEs.
Right, which is why if it's a principal, to me that makes a lot more difference than firing
And like I said,
a
none of
district
the principals
educational
would be fired.
administrator, which is very different than firing the one clerical person who's at a school site versus someone who shares jobs and has a little bit more backup.
So the
and an
clerical
ability
person
to
is
do
one
that.
part, is a part of one position, and another part-time position.
Right, it's not one complete position.
It's
there
not
are
one
parts
person.
of
So
positions.
that is
But that's-
information that
But
helps
we're
me make my
recommending one
decision.
FTE, and we're not. It is up to us to make sure that how that reduction is managed and the impact of that reduction over all the sites is managed. That's our job at the end of the day.
And how
And
much?
I will also say that I have invested countless hours, myself and with staff, to not have things status quo and done the same way the wheel has always worked. And I think you see that in this document. And I think that my commitment is to continue that momentum and only become much more clear and transparent in everything we do moving forward. And I also think that it's important to continue to note that I've done this for many years, and I have not seen as big of a commitment in almost any district to the classroom, both in our class size, in our classroom aides, and in the support in the classroom. And I think that's telling. We are kind of at a day where we can't afford the whole package. So we have to spend time. We're proposing these cuts now to be able to at least get through this budget process for 17-18. And I am also suggesting that over the course of 17-18, with the new superintendent on board and some good collaboration, that we rethink exactly how we present what we do here. And that goes to our LCAP and our LCAP goals, and how we use our resources in this whole package to meet the obligations that we have to kids and what that looks like. And it does mean that we have this big bubble of money, and how do we package that? And it could look different. It doesn't mean we don't have less services. It means we've taken what we can do and we've gotten more efficient and better. And I think that's our goal all around. I know in the business office, that's the whole goal this past year, is not the same old way. It's we need to be smarter, we need to do it quicker, and we need to be doing it with less resources. And I don't think that that's done easily when we're already in skinny staff. I think that the cuts that are recommended, and staff is sticking with option 5 for our recommendation, that this is the least impact to any of our schools, and any of the services to our kids. And if you want to offer up different options, I'm open. Understanding that that we do have to talk about reducing positions, because these are ongoing costs that we have to reduce in order to get our 3-year budget. The only place we can do that is in administration and clerical and classified salaries. And those just are, none of it tastes good.
I would just like to commend you and your staff for honoring the board's goals of lower class sizes, maintaining counselors, maintaining psychologists. Really, you have kept these cuts as far away from. I think we all realize that cuts need to be made, but the fact that you've been able to keep them as far from the classroom as possible is honoring what this board has direction we've given, and it will make by making cuts this year, it will make future cuts much less severe. Whereas if we didn't make cuts this year, next subsequent years will be incredibly painful, and they will not be away from the classroom, and it will directly affect children. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And it is a very team effort here.
Thank you for this fantastic, very clear-cut packet of binder here. It was very helpful that you actually got it to us a week in advance, and we get to look at it and study the numbers. Thank you.
So are you looking for direction here?
No, I'm not looking for direction. I will bring to you at the next board meeting, and I'll be very transparent that I'm going to bring at the next board meeting list of recommended reductions for you to take action on, and they will reflect option 5. I would, just let you know that if you have other options that you'd like me to explore and bring to that board meeting, you need to let me know between today and Thursday so I can get the documents prepared. But at this point, I'm going to move forward with action on 5 at the next board meeting at your discretion.
Our board, I think we do, when given the opportunity to collaborate on things and given options, I actually do think that we work well together. I think we have a strong variety of diverse backgrounds. So I almost wonder if there might be some areas where, we don't want to mess around on such a big thing, but I almost feel like together there might be an option.
Better option.
We want as many people as possible to vote for this, to approve this budget. You want as many people up here to approve this budget as possible. Hold on. So I'm just wondering if I know I'm not quite there yet on any of these options as they stand, because of a lack of of information, and I can keep asking questions, and I will. And I appreciate the ability to have the chance to ask those questions. So thank you for giving us this real gift of time. But I'm almost wondering if maybe there is an option 6 that I might, not coming up with anything new, but basically taking these options that are before us and working with them. So, Maureen, how would I propose those to you if I came up with something? And I'm not saying that I would, but
I would need it
right by
tomorrow.
Thursday. Okay,
so I can
tomorrow's
have
Thursday.
it prepared in time.
Tomorrow is Thursday?
Tomorrow's Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay, so because you said between now and Thursday.
If you have other options for reductions, but if you want me to start calculating different scenarios with different positions, that takes a little bit longer. I will tell you, though, that all of these options 1 through 5 have the same bullets shuffled.
I think that one big question that I have that seems like a fairly substantial line item savings has to do with savings with our superintendent in year 3, because we won't be double dipping for a superintendent salary.
We're not double dipping salary in
You're not double
17,
dipping
18.
now.
It's done in a couple.
That's
Okay, so the subsequent years.
right.
Okay.
That's not in 17, 18.
I just also wanted to speak to Rohil. You had a thought about coming up with different sources of revenue, and so just making sure that everyone in the public understands we cannot pay salaries out of any private money or fundraised money. It needs to be money that's in the general fund.
But you can pass a property tax.
So to do a parcel tax or a hospitality tax, or however you want to package that, from inception to passage to revenue
like
is a
5
3-4
years.
year,
Yeah,
5-year
yeah.
process.
It's not a short term.
No, and it's not off the table. I mean, that's an option, but that is also a long-term solution. The other thing that we need to also note is we as a school district cannot fundraise. So we cannot solicit dollars at any point. It's not legal for us to do so. We have the Carpinteria Education Foundation. That would be a role of a foundation, and then that would be donated money coming into the district, but that still cannot fund people. So, and they do a tremendous job raising money for our schools throughout the year.
Well, and we also have the Children's Project at Maine, and that's more than $1 million in private donations that indirectly come into this district every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but still it's not enough.
Well,
This is a dilemma every district in the state of California is talking about right now.
And if you're talking about fundraising, of which I have a little bit experience, you would actually need a staff person to do the fundraise. So before you even get started, it's another $100,000 that you would have to spend. So
I just really want to kind of think about, too, as a board, we're going to pass this budget soon, and then our new superintendent is going to have the job of carrying out the budget, presenting it to the community, being the face of that budget. And so the gift to her is in coming up with something that we collectively feel as positive as we can about. So I would like to know from you, from the staff, how flexible she would be with sort of working with it if she has some ideas about. I know she can't make further reductions, but in terms of designating which FTE reductions there are and things like that.
I think you stated you didn't want them speaking for her since she's not here.
No, a superintendent. A superintendent. Like, if a superintendent comes in July 1st, can they change? Like, if your staff has decided, we want to do we want to eliminate a half FTE at this site and a half FTE at this site, and she comes and looks at the plan and says, I think this plan would be better. Would a new superintendent, because she's really got to be the leader that carries that forward.
My guess is you've already vetted the options and gotten her opinion, but you're not going to share it with us.
But I mean in terms of a superintendent,
But
because she has to take responsibility for that. And then ultimately we take a responsibility for passing the budget. She takes responsibility for carrying out those budget changes.
So let me tell you what can happen.
Is she going to have ownership? Is she going to have the ability to take ownership of those
I don't
changes?
know. I didn't think we wanted to have staff
Not
speak
her
for her.
personally,
So let me
but
talk-
a new superintendent. superintendent.
Let me talk about the process once a budget's adopted at July 1st. So we're going to come next week with recommended action for the board to take action on reductions. The budget gets adopted by June 30th by the board. That budget is now the official adopted document. There is always opportunity through the year to make modifications and adjustments. However, people are fixed. At that point, they are there and they don't go away. So the opportunity for reductions is diminished at July 1. It will be a year process, as it was almost for me coming in, for a new superintendent to be able to understand it, completely absorb how we operate, get familiar with all of the schools, work with her administrative team at the sites and at the district, and absolutely throughout the course of the year, I think it's the intent that we talk about our educational plan, including the LCAP, and that will be hers to own going into the following year. So that's where we are.
So no changes during 1 year?
You can see the budget is a fluid document. You don't adopt it in July and have it never move. State funding, including property taxes, are not fixed. We don't know those until actually the end of the next year. So there's a lot of unknowns. I explained that we still have a lot of unknowns on federal funding. ESSA is something that's very discussed all over the place on whether or not we're going to have money. And that affects both Title I and special ed and after school program and cafeteria. I mean, all of that's federal funds. We do know that the state is having its own revenue issues. We are property tax funded, but there is one-time dollars that we have banked on for the past 5 years that have gone away. So that's part of the problem. And so this is something fluid. We watch it, we report on it. We see anything dramatic, we come to the board and we let you know. We have a budget we bring to you in September with our unaudited actuals. We have a budget in December and a budget in March as we bring first and second interim. And then where we are today will be next year bringing estimated actuals with the 18-19 proposed options.
I think in that case, then, I would want, if this was put in front of me as a staff recommendation, the questions that I would have would be like, okay, you can't tell me maybe what school this is going to affect, and you can't tell me what position this is going to be, but I would be looking for as much information as possible around that, not as a way of second-guessing your ideas, but in terms of really thinking in my mind, can I feel okay making that decision? You know what I mean? And just, just thinking out loud, it's like maybe there's a way that you could come up with. I mean, I don't know how these things work. If it's better to just have one staff recommendation and your logic behind it, and then we just all vote on it.
Well, we had several options, and we're coming forward as a staff recommending one of them.
Well, I guess it's our turn to take a look at those and really think about those further. Yes. And to continue to keep asking questions.
And there will be fluid conversations, ongoing and fluid conversations between now and June on the impact of these reductions to the work that has to get done. So
who's ultimately taking responsibility for the reductions?
We as a staff are. The executive staff. What do you mean?
Well, the board is taking
the board is taking action.
No, we only take responsibility for the budget cuts.
Yes.
Which includes reductions.
But I'm saying who's taking responsibility? Who's saying, because this is a question of, in a normal district, the superintendent is the person deciding on the cuts. They're deciding on this. They're the buffer. They're the final say for all staffing decisions. It would be the superintendent.
Right.
So in this instance, does the buck stop with Jamie? Is Jamie the one saying, like, I'm making these staffing recommendations?
So I think that Maureen already explained that we've been working with Diana throughout this process since she was here about 5 weeks ago. Was our first conversation with her and the team that she discussed, including Mr. Cornejo. And then she met with Maureen and Darlene at length Friday afternoon after your budget study session.
And it's very typical where the assistant superintendent or CBO is the one that's doing this work, even coming up with a reduction list or options to present to cabinet and the superintendent, and there it gets vetted in larger districts. I mean, we worked very collaboratively because I think, you know, this is my first year. I need we needed each other very, very much this year. But it is very much the process where my position would come up with this. We would talk about it before it got presented, and then we would share it with you. It typically would filter exactly how it did today.
So basically, it's a district who's responsible for the budget,
No, for staffing.
stuffing. Correct?
I guess what I'm trying to say is if there was issues, the news, you know, just somebody has to take responsibility for the staffing side of things. All we can do is decide on the budget side of things. Mm-hmm. But we're making the budget decisions that are going to affect the staffing. So it's this balance of trust. And I think I have because I haven't gotten all the information that I've needed up until now, including now, it's hard for me to trust that process, especially without there being a concrete person right now saying, I made these decisions, I'm going to go to bat for them, and I'm going to work with Diana on them to make sure that they're implemented correctly.
We have 3 people
So I
right
can
there.
I can tell you that we made these decisions. We'll go to bat for them, and we are collectively recommending option 5. And I can tell you that none of us operates individually. We operate as a team. That's the way that we operate. And I would like to just publicly commend this team, including all the administrators and directors sitting in the back of the room, who have been through a long year of transition and who have gone well above and beyond their job description and their regular work time. And we would not be here today with the services, the outstanding services we provide for kids day in and day out has not been interrupted one day, 1 minute, 1 hour of this entire school year of transition because of this team. So none of us operate singly, all on our own, taking responsibility things. We collectively take responsibility as a leadership team on behalf of our staff. And we have included Diana in that process, and she was selected. And we thank you for that selection. We think it was a wise selection, and we're very excited for her to come.
So was the idea that they were here to help justify the choices that were made? Because we don't know what the choices are going to be made.
They were directed to be here in case the board president directed any questions their way, and nobody's had any questions for them specifically. You as board members,
we haven't known anything that we could possibly ask them questions about, though.
I think
we've had time to digest this manual for, I don't know, 5 days now. So
since Friday, right?
Let's hear from you. Come up and tell us which option you're supporting. Come on, team.
I mean,
Comfortable.
Or is there anyone who would like to talk about? Does anyone want to speak?
Can I just remind you about process? It has to go through the board president to talk to staff that are not up here.
Then Andy, I would like to hear if there's anyone that has a strong feeling one way or another. You know, because I don't want to feel like they have their time.
We can take public comment.
Not from public comment, but from the administrators that were asked to be here that were so included in this process.
Okay.
I would love to hear from them.
If there's any staff members that feel strongly about anything they've heard tonight or anything they haven't heard tonight, you're more than welcome.
Or about budget cuts maybe in general, or as they relate to what we're talking about.
you mean option 5?
No, just about anything. Just basically the presentation they heard this evening, and as it relates to the cuts that there we are.
Good evening. One thing
You're a
that
glutton for punishment.
What was that?
You're a glutton for punishment.
One thing that I always do when I am faced with cuts, because I get my budget every year and I decide how we're going to spend it and how the site council is going to allocate it and so forth, I always try to make sure that we can maintain whatever we have and keep it away from the classroom. If it means us, meaning I or Mr. Vasquez, doing more, because all of a sudden we can't pay for that noontime gym to be open, I will try to make sure that gym is open during nutrition or lunch. 7 or 8 years ago, the district used to pay for that teacher to take about 150 students during lunch and open lunch for the gym for our students, and the district stopped it because that was part of the budget cuts back then, And we made it work with our own money because I did not want that to be affected, to the students to be affected. So every time we try to do our budgets, it's what can we do to maintain what we have and also keep it away from the students so that the students continue to see the same programs, the same process, even though someone is maybe doing more work behind the scenes.
Great. Thank you.
Well,
Okay. No,
I do.
Okay.
I mean, I would like to hear from somebody who's directly worked with Rincon, since that's a place where cuts are already being made there, and just to hear how that's going to look, moving forward. And, that's a place where it was very clear that was going to be cut. And, that's a place where they're going to already to have to deal with
The cut.
the consequences of that. Yeah. And perhaps more. We don't know. I mean, we don't know based on this summary. They may be losing a clerical
So
person.
can I
They
ask
may
you
be
a question?
losing an administrator.
So I'm curious if because it seems like we're searching for something to base our an emotional thing to base our decisions on.
Wait,
and-
when you say we, do you mean you? Or do you mean I am?
The board. The board is searching for. I'm speaking as a collective here. I'm not going to specify a single board
Okay.
member because we are a collective unit. While it's easy to talk about emotional things and get down and want to have it. Our job is to be up here at the
Right. We're like the
30,000 foot
coaches.
level.
We're like the coaches. These guys,
And
if
as
it's
soon
like
as
a team.
when we drill down onto specifics, of course you're not going to want to cut a specific person or a specific program, but that's not our job. Our job is
not
not
a person.
to do that.
It's a position. So
Okay.
here's how I'm
it's
seeing
a-
it. If
it's a
we're like
full-time
if we're
equivalent.
like the owners of the football team,
Yeah.
and these guys are the coaches on the field,
Yeah.
they're asking us to cut players. But we don't even know, they're not asking us to cut players because that would be specific people. They're asking us to cut positions. But they're not telling us it's a quarterback or it's I don't know, all the different football positions. But they're saying the team is going to function just as well. It's going to be just as strong, but you may be losing a quarterback or you may be losing a linebacker or you may be losing a this or...
Well, and they've told us that they're willing to do a little extra work as a result of
these
that.
three people are, but there's so many other people that it affects, and I'm not quite sure why the need for opacity when it comes to choosing you're going to eliminate a position. So we're going to have to approve that, correct? Right? Like that would come before us as a personnel item anyways. So we're going to see it.
But don't we want to give the
eliminate-
Going to come to you as a personnel item, as I've explained, because they're vacancies.
But do we want to micromanage staff so much that we are locking them into
I can't
flexibility?
micromanage them. Micromanaging implies that I have any jurisdiction over their ability to do their job. I don't.
Well, no, but you're going
all
to
I
base
can
your
do is
share
ask
perspective.
questions.
I think we're putting Principal Gloger in a difficult spot in that Jamie has said that this is a team effort and they're working together, but now you're asking him as principal of Rincon to defend his school. Of course, he's going to have to go out and do that, but meanwhile, it's still a team effort. I think we need to take responsibilities for the cuts. The team takes responsibility for the cuts and not put it on one administrator to justify.
Which I think is why I haven't been able to vote for
to
these
cut that.
cuts, because I'm not convinced that the process has been transparent. I'm not convinced that the process has been appropriate, and I'm not convinced that the process has been conducted with all stakeholders equally represented, and that's unfortunate. And mistakes were made, and I feel like it's gotten better, but I still don't. I never got that really solid confidence that this was a grassroots, transparent process
And that's
that
why it's-
involved all stakeholders.
That's
And
why it's
I
been
don't want to
3-2.
put Mr. Gloger on the
And
spot.
that's why it's been
but-
3-2.
But
Every time.
yeah, the problem has been that the people who will be affected have not been involved, in my opinion, and I'm not sure that they were truly consulted in this process. I haven't seen any evidence of that tonight. So I don't want to waste any more people's time because that's
I
my
provided
opinion.
you the evidence of the discussions we've had with all the staff at the different site levels. So I gave that to you tonight in that packet. And for the public, it's here. Also, you can request it from Jolene if you're interested in what each staff has to say about budget cuts. And I don't know what to say about being opaque because we
But I
feel
would
like we've
to
been
hear
as
something
transparent as
from-
we can.
I would like to hear something from Barnaby, regardless.
I agree with Mr. President.
Why not?
Here's well.
I mean,
This isn't. So why would we want to have an administrator? Of course, he's going to defend his school.
well,
So
That-
if
that-
we
that's freedom of
if we
expression.
said
I mean, you know what I mean? I mean,
but if we said we were going to make cuts at Canalino, of course Jamie would be defending her staff.
Well-
but our job is not to look at the specific schools. Our job is to look at the overall budget of the entire district. That we're the trustees of the entire district.
Correct.
Not
Correct.
just
That's why
Rincon
you
School
that-
or
that's
So
not just
I
Canalino
guess my
School.
question would be then to Maureen and Rogelio, what would you want us to cut?
My question would be not what, but how much. You know, when I have to cut my budget with anything, I start with a number.
So I think we
Right?
provided
Hold
that.
on.
We can
Hold
give
on.
you that number.
I mean, I could go through my process till the cows came home. It's going to be different than your process. It might be different than your process. All of us has the ability to understand a budget and to make cuts, right? When I'm working with a group of individuals, I'm going to approach that a certain way. I can't, everyone's going to do that differently, and that's fine.
Okay, how much would you cut?
How much would I cut?
Yeah,
I
but,
can't.
we have the numbers in front of us, and
I would- I
we
would-
see what
I
our
would-
deficit spending.
I would cut to ideally give us the best possible outcome, but I wouldn't be blind to the community and blind to the circumstances of our
I
situation.
don't understand what that means, Maureen. When you say we're blind to the community or blind to our situation, we've all been studying this budget for essentially the past 9 months. And of course it's changed over time as budgets always do, but we every year this process is exactly the same. And I've got to tell you that this year this information is clear, more concise, easier to understand. I mean, Jennifer, would you agree with that? I mean, this is the best presentation. I'm speaking to Ms.
Well,
Foster.
that's great.
But this
That's
is the best
great.
presentation that we've ever had, and it's clear, better, easier to understand. And,
That's great.
And I can't imagine it being any more transparent.
So I guess I just go back to my question. You've got staff sitting here right now, principals, all of us up here. What would you like us to cut?
Well, I think
I would
Yeah.
like to keep it, like I said before, away from Rincon. I mean, the students.
Rincon, so do we,
So then if it's not Rincon, what would it be?
I mean, anywhere else but Rincon.
okay.
So we
Those
can
students
cut-
are
So we'll
vulnerable.
cut two at the high school?
This is what I'm saying this since the very beginning. Remember when I said, well, if we can be recalled,
But-
if you can be fired, I mean,
But-
anyone else,
but-
anyone else.
This isn't a
because
popularity
those students,
contest.
No,
no, because those students are the
Roger,
most
why
vulnerable.
why is it
They
that you
need
don't
our
want
help.
Rincon cut?
Because they need our help. Those students are not.
But do they need like five students to one teacher,
I mean,
10 students to one teacher? I mean, what?
Well, do you know why they're there?
Huh?
Because they need the help. They're not. They cannot compete. They cannot compete with the high school students.
Why not?
Normal.
Why
well,
can't they?
well,
I mean,
first of all,
they're-
some of
Don't
them,
don't
some of them-
underestimate Rincon
but some of them
students.
are,
That does them a
are
disservice.
not
I
capable of
disagree-
learning
I
100%.
disagree.
Well,
Those students are 100. They're more than capable. I mean, this conversation is completely off track now.
No,
But the
it's on
question is-
track.
The question
It's
is,
on
what
track.
should we cut? Because it's not anything but. It's like, what should we cut?
Well, I think that question should have perhaps been asked of the board in January.
correct.
What?
I mean,
Before we even had the budget study. No,
it was already decided by
yeah,
then.
it was. And water under the bridge, lessons learned, that's fine moving forward. I
So
think
I'm
we've all
asking you
learned a
now.
lot.
I'm asking you now because we don't have an approved budget. We aren't back to you
Right.
next week yet. What would you like to cut?
I think for me personally, I would have to, being given the opportunity of such a huge thing, I don't want to go on record right now and just say the first thing that's on the top of my head. I feel like that would be really irresponsible and not appropriate. So I wish that I had been asked that. I wish that we as a
So
board
let me
had
ask
been
this.
asked that before any binder was even brought to us,
Would you-
I think this speaks to our larger problem that we spoke of in our last not organizational, but our workshop that we had, which is that we don't have any overarching goals as a board. And without those goals, how can we make fiscal decisions, sound fiscal decisions,
Let me
you know?
ask So if we know that 87% of our budget is salary and benefits.
Which is not
It's Santa Barbara. It's the same as.
It
It's
doesn't
not
matter.
unusual for a school
Okay,
district.
that's fine. But if you don't want any staff cuts, what would you cut from out of the remaining 13%?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that I wouldn't do any
It-
staff cuts.
so
I
it
said that I'm not comfortable
sounds-
going on the record right now.
But
just-
we have to approve a budget
Well,
in the
because
next
all of this
month.
took time to prepare.
Right.
This wasn't prepared overnight or in the spot, was it?
So Rogelio, are you comfortable with staff cuts, period? Or you saying no staff cuts?
This is what I'm saying. Anywhere but Rincon, because they need the help. That's
So
it.
it's okay to have 5 adults and 25 kids enrolled.
What I'm saying is that, like,
I'm asking you if you think that that's an appropriate adult to student ratio.
well, think about the other schools.
No, I'm asking you about Rincon. Is that what you feel is appropriate for
He's
that
already
site?
stated his opinion.
I would like him to say yes or no.
Yes.
He's
I
already
mean,
Yes,
said
you
that.
feel like that's
I mean,
appropriate. It's between me and
This
him.
is what I'm saying. Let's save those students. Otherwise, they might.
And
drop out
So we
You
have
know
to
what,
save
Michelle,
those students.
We all are entitled to have our opinions about the student populations that we feel most strongly about. It's very clear that you have a
Right.
deep heart
That's
for early
fine.
education students, and I don't think
I
we
feel
should
for-
be
yeah,
attacking
I
board
feel for
members for
Rincon
having
students.
strong
Yeah,
I'm
opinions
not
opinions
on
attacking
something.
him. I'm asking him a question.
I think if
As
Miss
you have asked.
if Miss Fitzgerald
We're
is
getting-
interested in taking our feedback, which she said she would be willing to take until tomorrow, you know, I think that's rather than waste everyone's time. Not that we're wasting everyone's time, but I think if we have solid feedback to give you,
Since
that we could give you that, and then you could try and incorporate it or not. But it also shouldn't be coming from just one board person, which is why we're having this conversation.
I do believe after the January study session and we vetted some reductions and lists, it was open then for the board to contact me with any suggestions, and I've heard none.
Well, it wasn't clear to me that as a single board member, I had the ability to give you any direction in
Well-
terms of what the budget was going to look like.
So that would have been you could have
So I
contacted
think if we, as a board, had a discussion about what our goals are, fiscal, there was a lot of chatter about like keeping things far from the classroom, but that wasn't a decision that we
I don't know
made
if it was
collectively.
chatter. That's
But
But
I mean,
back in
the
January,
assumption was
it's
being
back-
made to
back-
keep it far from the
back-
classroom.
we have feedback from teachers from all sites. We have a very comprehensive presentation by staff that wasn't just one staff member. It was multiple.
But Andy,
staff
you've
members.
been happy with this process from day one. So you didn't actually need any additional transparency. You felt comfortable with the steps from day one. So of course you're going to be fine with the budget from then until now. But we as a majority of the board have not all been satisfied with this process. And I think the goal, everyone wants the goal for
Wait,
us
as
to
a
be.
majority of the board has not been satisfied.
Sorry, excuse me. All of us have not been satisfied with the process, and that's okay.
So the question, I'm a little lost here because I don't understand, other than pulling at heartstrings, what we're after.
Well, what are that would probably be a different answer for each of us, and we could each tell you if you wanted. If you
Well,
wanted
I
to
don't
hear
think it's
from us,
appropriate for this venue.
Okay.
I think we've heard.
my goal for a budget is to have something that I can. I don't want to just say to people, well, it was purely based on fiscal reality, and we just had to look at the numbers.
Well, that sounds like what the governor said when he approved the minimum wage increase, he said, this doesn't make physical sense, but it's the right thing to do. And it doesn't, so if we do something that feels good or we think is the right thing to do, but it tanks our budget, then it's out of our hands.
But isn't there a middle ground? I'm hearing
we have
I'm
5
hearing
options
only
here.
fiscal. I'm hearing no right thing to do, any justification, no logic, no understanding, no
It's
process.
completely
And that's
logical.
part of our responsibility is fiduciary responsibility.
So
to
I've
the
heard
school
both of you
district.
guys say that, but I don't hear you hearing what I'm saying at all. So that's
I
fine.
do
It's
hear
okay.
what you're saying, but I hear what you're saying, but I don't understand what you're after because you haven't been able to be specific about what it is you would actually cut.
When my family and when my business makes decisions, we don't make decisions just based only on the numbers. Okay, we have to be cognizant of the numbers, but sometimes, like, I know that I want to give someone a raise, and as the numbers are standing, it's going to be really tough for me to give people a raise, but I know, to use your phrase, that that's the right thing to do. And in those instances, it's a values judgment, right?
But we're
Maureen-
contractually
But I don't
obligated.
understand.
87% of our dollars
We don't
are
have to agree, Andy. It's okay.
contractually obligated, though. That's
Right.
the
And
thing.
and you and I believe it sounds like we have different values in how we make fiscal decisions, and that's okay.
So here's my value. You make it sound like I'm just looking at the numbers. My value is, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, we have extremely capable professionals up here who are here to do that job. It's not my job to run a school district. I have zero knowledge. That $26 million budget, I need to rely on the professionals that we have here. I need to rely on people who do this day in and day out, and that's my value. That's where I'm basing this. I've heard clearly that staff has made a recommendation. I've looked through all of this whole week. I've been listening to Maureen going section by section. I'm satisfied with that. That's my value. And based on the feedback from what staff have presented, that we're keeping this away from kids, that this is the financially responsible things to do, that's what I'm basing my decision on. I'm just not looking at the numbers. Yes, we are looking at the numbers, but I'm hearing everything else that goes along with that number. So,
I think the board's values, at least in the past, has been to keep any cuts we make as far away from the classroom as possible. We've put a priority on lower class sizes. We've put a priority on counselors. We've put a priority on psychologists, and I think we've seen great returns from those priorities. And so I agree with you, Maureen, that we haven't had a chance to sit down as a board, as this new board, and set up our priorities. But I think the priorities that past boards have been very good for the budget situations we've had.
Well, and I just think of two things that Diana, or that we kind of spoke about at our last workshop or whatever, and it was one involved the discussion of a budget committee that is made up of community members who are then working year round to consult with the board and help them make the budget decisions, so that it's actually in our bylaws. That we already have it listed as in our bylaws, and it was something that Mrs. Rigby mentioned in our committee workshop. The other thing I was thinking about with her is because she comes from a community where the town council, or excuse me, the entire community has to pass the school board's budget. They get to vote on it. So I was just thinking of what,
because
like,
it's a parcel tax.
right? So
It's a fiduciary.
Yeah.
right. So how interesting that, like, her experience is of having to sell her budget essentially to the whole community. You know what I mean? And so this budget has been sold to me as a board member, and you know what I mean? I'm a skeptic at the moment, and that's okay. You know, that's okay.
Well,
But it is what it is.
I've had an open door. You can come in and see our operation at any time. You can see how the detail is built into this budget, because you see the reports that you have in the binder. I think the longest report might be like 56 pages, but my detailed report is more like 500. So, the detail is extensive, and it's been pared down in summary. I will also remind you that we did discuss, I went through the entire binder with Mrs. Rigby. While she's not on board yet, and she is not our superintendent until July, we did want her to have some idea of what we're presenting to you as a board and what we're recommending as a leadership team. We talked about all of the options and discussions that led us to the option we're bringing forward for recommendation, as well as the other options. And we do feel that this is a recommendation option that she can support for next year. Understand that until she's on board, she will not have the opportunity to build her program. We are not recommending in any reductions, reducing programs that have been done in the past. Once you take a program away, it never comes back. We are not reducing class size. We are not reducing anything remotely close to the classroom. And I think it's important to also remind the board and those listening that it is not an option to not adopt a solvent budget. If we don't adopt a solvent budget, which means we have a full 3% for the current and 2 subsequent years, the county will qualify us or certify us negative, and at that point they come in and they call the shots.
But you've already gotten a majority of people on the board voting for it since day one. So I don't know really who you're speaking to. Do you know what I mean? Because there's only 5 people up here that can vote on this particular budget, and 2 of them have been consistently unconvinced by it. So it's okay. It's a split decision, and it hasn't, there have been improvements, and that's been good. And what can you say?
That I mean, not to be critical, but that sounds almost like a cop-out, Maureen, that that the budget will be passed. Yet you're going to resist it.
It hasn't changed in the way that I needed it changed in order to.
I mean, think of how that sounds to the community and how everyone.
This is what I would say to the community: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. So we have been given essentially the same cuts. We've now been given 5 options, which is great, and they are slightly different, and I'm going to take more time with them and consider them. So they are slightly different, but they do involve the same set of cuts that we were given at the very beginning that we voted against.
So again, 87% of our budget, I hope we all agree on that, 87% of our budget is staffing.
Right.
Okay. So and we saw that we have about 100.
It sounds like you're trying to get us to agree, Andy, and we're not going to agree.
Well, no,
so we don't need to.
We need to know. We should agree that we need to cut. That really the only area we can cut is staff.
Well, we have. Okay.
Have you heard me say that I won't cut staff?
I haven't heard. No, yes, I have actually.
I have not ever said I'm not ever cutting staff ever.
Okay.
I couldn't have run on a school board. My dad was a school board president. My mom was a teacher.
Okay.
My family has been pink slipped. Andy, has your family been pink slipped?
That's what I'm saying. Anywhere but
Rincon. Yes.
Yes. So you understand that working for a school district involves getting pink slipped.
We have heard from. I think it's only fair to hear from Barnaby. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair.
So.
I don't think that's appropriate this time. It's going to put Mr. Gloger in a very.
I'm not sure why the administrators were. I just want to say I apologize because it seems a little awkward. Like we brought them here to sort of reinforce the budget proposals being proposed, but it sort of puts them on the spot because their schools and their sites and even them as people may be sort of implicated by the cuts here. So it's a really kind of uncomfortable position to have them here.
We actually heard from Mr. Gloger last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You asked him some pretty pointed questions in regards to his school.
But I'm talking about tonight with regard to the budget.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of an awkward.
And the community, the community is watching. The community is watching.
Yes, they are. So what I'm going to do is entertain anything, Rogelio, Mo, any other board members that would like to offer any suggestions for reduction between now and Thursday morning, so that I can bring to the board at next Tuesday's regular board meeting suggested reductions to incorporate into the final budget document. So we have a staff recommendation. We are not asking you to do anything with that tonight. We're just sharing that for information. And I will entertain, like I explained, anything that you want to give to me that I could incorporate in, or if you want to sit down.
Can you tell me what positions are open right now, like vacant?
I don't have that list right here.
Do you have that, Darlene? Do you know how many are vacant?
Because even knowing
It's
which,
not a final number at this point, is it?
I don't have a final number for you, only because there's not a specific time frame when teachers or all staff need to provide either a resignation or retirement to me. It's to their discretion when they submit it. At this time, we do have vacancies. What that number is, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
again,
I know we have, administration-wise, we have a CMS principal. Teachers, we have a 0.6, and these are all based on current resignations or retirements that we've received. And they've already been through the personnel summary, and you have all seen and approved that in a consent agenda in previous board meetings. We have a 0.6 math FTE at CMS. We have a 1.0 FTE English position at CMS. We have a 1.0 grade 6 at CMS. We have a director of special programs, which is at the district level. I have about three IA positions, between 4 to 5.5 hours. Both special ed and gen ed. Off the top of my head, those are the only ones that I can think of.
so it looks like the only admin positions are the director of special programs and the Carpenter Middle School principal. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Okay.
So,
Yes.
one last attempt. Are you denying Barnaby the chance to speak?
No, I'm not denying him. I'm just not
Well,
asking him
then
to speak.
I would like to respectfully. ask
I
you
feel that's highly
to let him
inappropriate
speak.
for this venue.
Why?
Andy, just to open it up, maybe we could ask if any of the principals would like to speak to their site, if there's any program that they either felt comfortable cutting or definitely did not want to cut. I mean, I don't think that's inappropriate. Just to say, and then they have the choice. They can say no, I don't want to talk.
So of course, if we've gone and met with staff members at a particular site and heard their pleas for why their programs should remain intact, of course you're going to have an emotional attachment to that, and you're going to be emotionally attached, and that's going to affect your opinion. But if you did that at every site, it would tear you up. And I mean, I don't mean to sound without caring about these things, but we are tasked with the job of approving a budget, and whether those cuts come from one campus or another campus, it really should not affect our decision to approve a budget and approve cuts at specific levels. So other than an emotional plea, I don't know what you're actually
No, it's not. It's not emotional. It's just
Logistics.
emotions. It's logic. Emotions are out of the way. It's just the logic of it.
the logic of it.
The logic of it.
So you've already said
I mean,
that anything less than five students to 25 or 25 students to 5 adults at a campus it would be devastating to Rincon. So I think we've heard that from you already.
The results will soon be known. The result will soon be known.
Result of
Any cuts.
Well, we do this every year, Rogelio. This is a regular process where we approve a budget.
Yeah.
Principals are not eliminated every year. And I'm not saying that that's being proposed, but that at one point was on the table, and may still be, because things are a bit vague. In my entire experience of the CARP schools, I don't remember there ever being a discussion of eliminating a principal, and this year that was discussed.
We discussed it last year when we talked about Rincon.
About
family school.
Okay, was someone? I don't remember a principal being eliminated, because I think there's a basic understanding that schools need principals. And so, anyways, that's something that seems like a pretty dramatic, that would be a very dramatic change
That's not
to
what
any
we're talking
school
about
site.
right now.
Well, see, for me, I don't actually know what I'm talking about because I'm just being told administrator, clerical,
But again, I think we should
a
go
position
back.
that's open.
So I mean, we're having a circular.
Because Andy,
discussion.
once the budget is passed, I don't think we need to prolong this. We all understand. Okay, we're all on the same page. Once the budget is passed, our staff will implement it. The
Yes.
cuts will be made. That's final. Okay, we make the budget decisions. All I'm asking for is to have the best possible information so that I can make a good choice. Okay, so that I can understand to the best of my knowledge the consequences of my actions.
I think Maureen's been pretty forthcoming with all of your questions. She emailed us back this morning with that
Yes.
long
Well,
list
But
of
the
questions.
thing is that
gave
we're
me
going to be
lots of
accountable for it.
fiscal information,
We're going
which
to be
is great.
accountable for it, basically.
But in terms of the HR piece, I understand that there are protections and privacy matters and that sort of things. But again, I'm going to go back to the analogy of the silly football analogy. It's like being asked to cut players without knowing their positions. It's
No. So you're looking at it wrong. We're the owner. We say we have this much money, and you have to make this work. And they're saying, okay, well, we can make this work by cutting these things that are the farthest away from the football field as possible. That's what they're saying. That's the closer analogy. We're telling staff that we have this much money to play with, so you need to make your team work with this much money, and they're coming back and saying we're going to make these cuts.
I think at
really
the end
far
of the
away from the
day,
football field. We're going to do trainers, and we're going to do all these other things that are as far away from the actual thing that matters.
I think again,
possible.
Again, we don't come from the same place in terms of money. None of us do exactly. And so, where I'm coming from is the need to explain to my community why a cut was made. And again, I'm just going to keep going back to this. If I think we're belaboring this point. I think we can just let it go.
I'm wondering if I could provide some clarity about, return back to why we proposed the cut of the Rincon teacher, which was ultimately approved by the board. We went, if you recall, at that budget study session, Maureen went through multiple slides on the PowerPoint of staffing versus student ratios. And if you recall, that was the place in the district that had the lowest staffing to student ratio. And we do have a board policy, 5181, if anyone wants to look it up, about alternative school staffing to student ratios. Board policy 5181. And I believe it's 25 students to one teacher at an alternative school. So we are well below our own board policy, and that is why, because Mr. Delgado, you could also go to, say, for example, we could have Mrs. Escobedo talk about special day classes. So we have special day classes with moderate to severe students who are getting diapers changed and toileting and doing an enormous amount of work that are 12 students in them that are higher class size than a Rincon class. So then you could go to your own packet that I gave you there of staff feedback, and we have some special education staff who commented, why are the class sizes at Rincon so low? The classes at the high school are too high. So no matter what perspective you're going to look at it from, the reason we decided on Rincon to suggest to you was because it had the lowest ratio of staff to students. Nobody has any intention, and I think we've been very clear about this, of leaving Rincon students behind, of not supporting Rincon students. There's been this sense that we're closing Rincon, or all we're doing is eliminating a teacher and putting the class size around 15 per teacher, which is still quite low, well below your board policy. We do not intend to eliminate the 80% counselor that's there for those students. So nobody has any intention of doing anything to Rincon students other than continuing to support them in the manner that the other students. We have a lot of fragile populations. Rincon is not the only fragile population in the district. We have multiple fragile populations, and we're never going to be in the position of putting one student more important than the other. That's just not going to happen from the leadership team, at least.
But why you said that those students are there at the Rincon?
There's a multitude of reasons for that. I could have Mr. Gloger, could you answer the question as to, or Board President, is it okay if he answers that question, why students are at Rincon?
President Schaefer and board members, I first want to say that I appreciate, on behalf of myself and Rincon staff, I appreciate that, just like all of our programs and all of our students, that you are being thoughtful about providing services to our students. And you have a very difficult decision, all of you do. And you have to think about the whole school district and every student in the school district. And so I don't envy you. But as far as Rincon and Foothill students, there's just a couple things I wanted to mention. Students primarily are enrolled at Rincon as a choice because they are either behind in credits. Again, Rincon is a high school, Foothill is a high school, so typically we'll see 10th, 11th, 12th grade students who are behind in credits because they have not passed most likely math or English at Carpinteria High School. So that's a reason why some students enroll at Rincon or Foothill High Schools. Some students are there because they choose a smaller school community, more personalized educational program, because a environment of 650 versus at this time we have 29 students enrolled at Rincon High School. So it's about 9 or 10 students per class at this time. The population ebbs and flows. The beginning of the year, it was half that, and as the year goes on, it increases. So we never know for sure how many students, because students can choose to transfer to an alternative high school at any time. They can only choose to transfer back to a comprehensive high school at the semester breaks, and that's board policy. Students choose to enroll at Rincon for those reasons. Some students do not choose to enroll at Rincon. They are involuntarily transferred through discipline or attendance reasons. So that's a very small group, but that is one of the reasons why. And so every staff member that we have at Rincon and Foothill adds to the support and the programming and the educational experience of our students. And so any reduction of that is less support for our students. Students across our district, as Administrator in Charge Pursoon said, we have fragile populations throughout our district. I can only speak at this point to Rincon and Foothill. That's why I'm speaking right now. But those students may typically have needs that are best met through the staffing that we have now. And so a reduction to that will have an impact. The more support that we can provide to our students, the better, especially at Rincon and Foothill. Keep in mind that as a principal at this time, I'm shared between Rincon and Foothill, Carpinteria Family School, and pupil services responsibility. So I'm only on campus part-time at Rincon and Foothill. And that was a change this year, and that has had an impact, I think, on the safety and the ability of our counselor to perform just counseling, because it takes, when I'm off campus, she's the administrator designee, so she's doing more administrative work at that time. So that has an impact. So we've already seen a change on our campus because of that. And so looking forward, we'll do the best we can with the resources we have, but as I've shared before, students with the biggest needs need the most. And so from the perspective of principal of Rincon and Foothill High School, that's what I share with you, and I understand Administrator in Charge Pursoon from a perspective of principal of Canalino and the special needs, special day classes there. That's a priority as well. So you have to make that decision. You get to make that decision, but but I can just speak to Rincon and Foothill at this time, and that we are getting the job done right now. I'm sorry, Maureen, I don't have the data that we talked about last week for you yet, but students' attendance is improving. Students' grades at Rincon and Foothill is improving. Small, and so we can foster those relationships and rapport, and so students come and they do well and they transfer back to Carpenter High School if that's their goal, and they're successful.
Just to clarify, I stopped for probably only 5 minutes at the Rincon High open house last week that all board members were invited to, met with some of the teachers, talked to the community extremely briefly, and just suggested that that having data on the students at Rincon would help board members, like having concrete data beyond KSIP numbers, and that creating a statistical profile of a Rincon student might help the board then be able to make better decisions, because I think data informs decision making and takes things out of the emotional realm. And if we had the data to show us this staff ratio allows for these improvements, it makes a change in the justification of that. So that was just a suggestion that I came up with on the spot with Barnaby. So
I wonder, if we were creating a data profile for a certain population of students at one school, would it not then be incumbent upon us to make a data profile for every school and every student?
No, it wasn't. It was merely along the lines of like a lot of time, for instance, what I said is that when Mr. Gloger did the presentation for Rincon, all the other principals that did their presentations showed test scores as a way of showing kind of, oh, here's how our school has done. Well, at Rincon, they didn't show the test scores, and so I was just talking about why that was, and I understand
highly variable. Just in the past, the test scores at Rincon have been
Right.
highly variable because
Right.
it's such
So
a
how
small
do you?
population.
It goes along with school accountability, and that's an impossible
So I have a
challenge.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
That's an easy answer right there. So the template that I was working with for the single school plan
Right.
did not include data graphs,
Right.
just because I was not aware that was expected. And so when I presented on Carpenter at Family School, and I believe the other elementary schools, we did not present those data charts. I have those data charts. I can share some of those data charts with you, but that just wasn't part of the PowerPoint that I presented. Those are the data from the assessments, the CASP assessments. Keep in mind that if you have a size of less than 10 students, that data is not public. And at Rincon, for some of the assessments, we had less than 10 students. So we can't share that information, but for where we had more than 10 students, we can share that information. I can email that to you. And you can find that online. The dashboard, CDE's new dashboard, alternative schools are not, at this point, data is not available for alternative schools. So this year, we don't have the dashboard data. And in looking at DataQuest, which was one of the data sites we've used in the past, the data for like discipline, for example, is only up to date through 2014-15. It doesn't include last year's. And I was just working on that today to get some of that data together for you, and that's not in there. So that, to answer your question of why that data hasn't been presented yet, I hope that helps.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Cornejo in relation to Rincon.
Thank you, Barnaby.
So can you explain to us and the public what the student ratios in the past have been at Rincon?
So I
Student
worked at
teacher
Rincon
ratios.
for 8 years. We started Foothill High School in probably 1997, because back then Rincon was close to being cut also, so we created Foothill High School to bring additional support to other students that were not coming to Foothill. We've always ranged, when I was there, between 50 to 65 students. That was the number
With 3 staff members.
with 3 staff members. Just Foothill, just Rincon.
Gerardo, I have a question. What is the ratio between your counselors and your students?
About 310.
310 per counselor?
Yes.
And what is your average class size?
27, 28.
Okay. And wait, I have a
On some, for example, in foreign language, you're in the 30s. In language, you're in the 30s also.
so
but in
that's the
math,
average.
The average is about
Okay.
20.
And Kirsten, what is the average adult to or teacher to student ratio for your special ed students?
Next year at Carpinteria High School, we're looking at each of the 3 staff members of it that are there currently, starting with between 25 to 28 on their caseloads. And as you probably are aware, 28 is the maximum we're allowed per the state.
Okay.
I think just responding to Mr. Gloger's comments, I think the thing that's really struck me is just kind of thinking about like chain of command and budgets, right? And so budgets are never easier, budget cuts are never easy or fun. And so you look to your site staff to recommend what places are available for cut. It's not sounding to me like someone with a real deep understanding of Rincon recommended cutting FTEs, and it sounds like it was based just on sort of like, oh, where's the low-hanging fruit?
That's absolutely not true,
So,
Maureen.
well-
Mr. Cornejo has worked at the Rincon School for a number of years, as he already stated, and he was involved in those discussions. Mr. Gloger, as you know, was on leave at the time that we presented that budget, and so Mr. Cornejo was taking duties at Rincon School. So
Well,
it,
but you
that
and
was
you
not
inter-
true at
okay,
all.
but okay, so they were
Quite
so Mr.
disparaging
Cornejo.
comment there, Maureen.
What was my comment that was disparaging?
That staff basically took the low-hanging fruit when Mr. Glover
Well, no,
wasn't
I'm just
available.
basing it based on what I just heard right now, which is that eliminating one staff member is going to have a huge effect on those students. And so I can't understand why.
I don't think that
why
he said it's
someone
going to
with a
have a
deep
huge impact.
understanding-
He
but
said
th-
it's going to have an impact. If you cut in any other area, it's going to have an impact. So
Okay,
I again
but
would ask
if-
you, where would you cut?
Okay, this is what I'm talking about with chain of command. So if we knew that over our schools there needs to be one FTE eliminated, you talk to the school sites and no one's probably going to say, oh, well,
We have it
here's
right
a
here.
here's a teacher up for grabs, and you know what I mean? But
We have it right here. We have the list of of the staff priorities right here
from
from each
And-
site survey.
right, and none of them is going to recommend an FTE, right?
No, but they list their priorities. They're not. No, it's not their
Right.
job to tell us
Right.
to get rid of
Right,
someone.
but a principal does have to say, if a
they-
superintendent comes to the principal and says, look, we've got to eliminate one FTE across the district, the principals then can say, okay, please don't, this is something that can't happen.
Again, we come back to so I think we understand that you both having a really hard time cutting staff.
No, that's
No,
not
no,
what I'm
no,
having
no,
a hard
no,
time.
no.
So don't
Remember
put
I
words in
said-
my mouth, please.
Okay. Well, you're having a really hard time cutting staff at certain sites.
No, that's actually not. I
Okay,
think we should probably just end the meeting because I don't think anything.
We're
I
going
think we're
around in
just like
circles. We could
going around in
spend it
circles,
till midnight.
and Roger and I have been I think saying the same thing again. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it's the definition of insanity. Roger and I have been. I can't speak for anybody else,
So,
but I've said the same things, which is
Maureen,
that process to me.
how does
Excuse
that-
me,
Yeah, but-
excuse
but-
me, Andy. I don't like to be interrupted. Process.
Please
is
give
important.
other board members a chance, though, to talk.
So we can now interrupt each other. That's okay.
No,
'cause
go ahead. Just finish your thoughts.
process, transparency, grassroots decision making. I think this is the best version of that we've seen so far. Unfortunately, the process was compromised from the beginning, and
What does that mean?
it means what it means.
I don't understand so how does first of all, what is grassroots how do you define that, grassroots decision making?
Anyone else on the board want to try and define that? Grassroots decision making?
My guess would be that you are wanting the community to have more of a say or a vote in the decision making. Is that grassroots?
I think grassroots is that literally it's that idea of grassroots. So like grassroots fundraising is like Kickstarter. So it's the idea that the ideas are not top down, we're telling you what to do, but it's like organic,
That's
as
what we're
needed.
elected to do, though.
Yeah, so
Okay, but that's two different types of management style, and they're very different. And it's two different types of just style of working in the world. You know, one says, how many people, we're going to get pizza, you know, let's all decide. And the other one says, we're getting 6 pepperoni pizzas, and that's the way it is.
so not to
It's two different approaches.
please no one take this as a political kind of thing, but that's the difference between community organizing and elected official. Community organizing is a grassroots, right? I mean, you're going around, you're on the ground, you're at the roots, and you're bubbling up ideas. This is a very, very defined organization, and the board is a top down, because that's the way it's set up. So I think that we're elected again as representatives of the community. We were all elected at our own time, and the constituents felt like we would be their voice. And so I want to honor that. When I ran, I put out my, values and my judgments and what I was going to concentrate on, and the community elected me. Now, I have 2 years left, and I'm going to honor that, but that's the way this process works. It is us. It is us.
So you're saying that I should be making my decisions in a vacuum based solely on the information that I'm getting from these paid staff members, and that I should not be talking to the community or,
So
trying to
you're
get
putting
the best
words in my
judgment.
mouth.
Okay, but
Yeah.
that's grassroots. All it has to do, it just has to do with the style of how you come to your final decision. Ultimately, we're going to come. Our vote represents our decision, and we only have one,
Absolutely.
and there's only 5 of them. So we all share the equal power for that. How we come to that
Right.
decision is very different, and that's what I mean by grassroots. Grassroots means that stakeholders are involved, and obviously there has to be. There's a chain of command, so the principal goes to the teachers and gets their input. Then the principal goes to the things. And what I'm hearing is,
That was done.
okay, well then you should feel very happy about the process
I
and not
don't-
have any concerns,
I still
which you don't.
understand the
So there you
comment,
go.
though,
Let's-
of that the
fine.
process
Let's move-
was
let's move forward.
compromised
Let's
from
keep
the
going.
beginning. What did that? Can you define that?
I think in terms of just as a board, being given, a huge packet like this on the same day, and then being,
Well, we've had this for 5 or 6 days.
right. This time, which I think is why the process is getting better. So I don't think we need to deliberate on this. We're not making any decisions tonight. We've gotten the information that we need. I don't think we're getting any new information. I think what this speaks to me is that as a board, we are not unified in our fiscal goals. We don't understand what our goals are as a board and what's leading us in terms of our larger district vision. And so without a district vision, we can't have the fiscal vision or goals to back that up. And I think that's why there's a lot of I think if we knew, okay, if we had decided at some point, here's our top 3 priorities, and we're going to align our fiscal house behind it, I think that these decisions would be easier. So I hope that at some point we can do a workshop kind of similar to what we did, but maybe strictly around budget goals. Because I think we have, like I said, our visions are very equally, we equally represent the community, 5 of us as a whole. But when we get in a room and try to make these decisions without that alignment
We disagree.
of our larger picture, it's hard to know where to, how to proceed.
I agree with you.
It sounded to me like you were impugning the integrity of the process when you said it was corrupted from the beginning. That was why I took offense at that comment.
Well, I don't think you need to take offense at an opinion that I have about not feeling great
Well,
about
that's
the
a
process.
pretty strong word. Corrupt is a
Well,
pretty strong word.
and it's okay for me to use strong words, Andy. You don't have to defend the actions of anything. Do you know, my experience of something is going to be very different than your experience, and at the end of the day, you'll get a vote, and I'll get a vote, and then that will be the end of that. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to convince me that your way is correct.
Oh, I'm not trying to convince you, but what I keep hearing is that you recognize that cuts need to be made, yet it's that it's in a high likelihood that the budget will be passed as it's recommended to us. Yet you're going to be able to fall back and say, well, I didn't support that budget, therefore I'm not a bad guy. And that sounds like it's a little bit of a cop out in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would hate for you to characterize me that way, because I think that's idiotic. If you get on an elected position where you're tasked with making fiscal and policy decisions for a municipality, you better be willing to make tough financial decisions. But the only ability that I have right up here is to vote and to ask questions.
Okay, great.
And the right to disagree. That's it.
All right, I think
Okay.
we're all done unless anybody has anything else to add. Thank you, everyone.